Chapter 2177. With a sudden roar, Yulong finally broke free from the crowd and flew over. At this moment, he had obviously been completely blinded by anger. At this moment, apart from the thought of killing Chu Yang, there was no other thought in Yulate's mind. Chu Yang beat him up like this, and made him lose face in front of his enemies and subordinates. Yulong had never suffered such a big loss in his life. Moreover, it was the kind of loss that he couldn't say anything about. If he didn't take revenge for this, he would really live up to the saying, "I'm not a man." Chu Yang looked at Yulong, who was gritting his teeth and rushing over with a ferocious expression. His eyes revealed a strange playful look. Yulong had lost his mind now. Yulong had lost his ability to think normally now. And this was the best result that Chu Yang wanted. Otherwise, why would he have to spend so much effort? First, he didn't hesitate to use his vitality to cast the Calamity Sword Art 10 times in a row. Then, he completely suppressed Yuxian, and wantonly used schemes and tricks to make Yuxian embarrassed. What was the point of wasting his breath to play monkey tricks? Yulong's real cultivation was much higher than Chu Yang's. If it was a fair battle, both sides would go all out, and the final result would be Chu Yang's death. If it wasn't for the continuous use of tricks to make Yulong's cultivation drop a little, this battle would be impossible to fight. How could Chu Yang not know that he was twisting words and forcing logic? How could he not know that he was distorting the truth? The so-called reason was simply untenable. As long as everyone thought about it carefully, they would be able to see through the whole story. The people in front of him were just confused by a series of so-called truths. They deeply despised Yulong's character in their hearts. That was why they all slandered Yulong. I believe that with a little more time, there may be no need for Yulong to explain himself. Everyone on both sides would be able to see through the whole story. However, as long as Yulong lost his mind now, it was enough. Previously, the only purpose was to agitate Yulong enough to make his mind chaotic and lose his composure. If not, how could he have a chance to win? If Yulong was still clear-headed, how could he fight with him? What kind of fair battle is this? It's simply a battle to the death where the strong bully the weak. Chu Yang had spouted a lot of nonsense before. Perhaps, there was only one sentence that was completely true. That was, on the battlefield, when two sides were facing off against each other, it was a matter of course. Chu Yang sneered and shouted, "Yu Qi, I've already spared you, but you still want to court your own death? Since you want to die so much, I might as well fulfill your wish. Hand over your life." This sentence was undoubtedly adding fuel to the fire. Yu Lai was angered by him to the point that his qi and blood surged even more, and he almost spat out another mouthful of blood. Although Late Rain couldn't win against Chu Yang in words, her heart was as clear as snow. Chu Yang is a shameless guy. His mouth is invincible. I'm definitely not his opponent. But why should I argue with him? Let's go over and fight. I won't give him a chance to play tricks again. If he still wants to use his fists to hit me, it's impossible. Also, his sword has already been thrown to the sky. Right now, this guy is basically unarmed. Although I'm also unarmed, but how can Chu Yang's cultivation be compared to mine? In this fight, I have full confidence in winning. In front of an absolute gap in strength, any tricks that can't be put on the table are meaningless. I'll return the favor the way I was beaten just now. I'll use this pair of fists to beat this shameless guy into meat paste. Late Rain rushed up like a mad tiger, waving her fists to hit. The moment she punched out, her heart was filled with tyrannical pleasure, as well as the excitement of revenge. Chu Yang on the opposite side shouted, "Unrepentant person, don't blame me for being impolite." He actually punched out the same way. Late Rain gritted her teeth, and added 30% more strength to her fists. Her eyes were filled with madness, as if she had already seen Chu Yang's fists being crippled and smashed by her fists. However, just as the two fists were about to collide, there was a sudden burst of light, and the sword aura flourished. A sword suddenly appeared on top of Chu Yang's straight fist without any warning. It was a sword that shone with boundless light, and was incomparably sharp. Chu Yang said with a smile. One ray of cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms. This move this time was different from the one he used in the battle with late rain. It was the ultimate change of the tribulation sword technique, which was the ultimate version. One ray of cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms. 8 moves merged into one and exploded to the limit. Late Rain thought that the opponent's sword had already been thrown away, or at least not taken back for the time being. How did she know that it would appear in Xu Yang's hand again? How could every single one of these divine weapons be like this? But the sword in Xu Yang's hand was clearly the sword that she fought with just now. When on earth did he find it? This is too illogical, right? Late Rain mustered all her strength to attack, but she also felt the tyrannical threat from Xu Yang's sword at the moment when their attacks were about to collide. For a moment, her consciousness was blazing as she roared. Despicable! She actually tried her best to retreat. Although his golden body of the sage had been completely replenished, he had done so by stimulating his own life potential. Otherwise, he would not have been able to recover so quickly. Moreover, after this round of exhaustion, he would not be able to recover if he did not meditate and recuperate for 8 to 10 years when he returned. If he were to be broken by Chu Yang again at this moment, even if Late Rain's cultivation was not destroyed, it would be hard to say if he could recover in this lifetime, even to the extent that with the intuition of a martial artist towards danger, he could clearly and truly feel that Chu Yang's current move was more than 10 times more powerful than the previous moves. So Late Rain could only choose to retreat. But he was originally charging forward with all his strength, and now he suddenly changed to retreat. In such a situation where he was in a dilemma, where he was lost due to anger, and where he lost his rationality, there was finally a little bit of delay and flaw that inevitably appeared. Although the flaw was small, it was enough for Chu Yang, who had been deliberately searching for the flaw. The boundless cold light that Chu Yang had unleashed shot onto Late Rain's body at the same time. However, at the last moment, Late Rain's pair of fists finally swung out. It collided head-on with Chu Yang's sword tip. Puff, 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 puff. With a series of collision sounds, the two people who were fighting fiercely separated again. Late Rain's tall and sturdy body fell back like a kite with a broken string, while Chu Yang's body on the opposite side spun and staggered back rapidly. On the ground, 4 deep marks appeared at the same time. Those were marks that were plowed out by the feet of the two people. The robe on Late Rain's body instantly turned into a beggar's outfit. Countless tiny blood lines spurted out from his body bit by bit. The body protection technique and the golden body that he had hurriedly activated finally could not withstand Chu Yang's ultimate sword. There were at least 100 wounds on his body. Although without exception, they were all superficial wounds, and some were even shallow scratches on the skin, he was still injured after all. Chu Yang's invincible and all-pervasive sword aura had made Late Rain suffer a lot this time. Although the bones and internal organs of his body did not suffer the most direct and frontal damage, they had suffered countless shocks. With a wah sound, Late Rain spat out a mouthful of blood again, and his face quickly turned gray. Chu Yang on the opposite side also spat out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. His body swayed, and he spat out 2 more mouthfuls of blood in succession. His face was as pale as a sheet. The result of the head-on collision this time was that both sides suffered. And the result this time was something that even Chu Yang did not expect. In Chu Yang's calculation, Late Rain's continuous schemes seemed to have been almost defeated by him. Previously, even the golden body of the sage was shattered. Although he forcefully used his life potential to repair it, his real combat power should have dropped by at least 1 level. Coupled with the internal injuries, the continuous suffocation, and the anger that made him delirious, with the current cultivation of Late Rain, even the strongest could only be at the level of a beginner sage, right? But even under such circumstances, he could still cause such a result of both sides suffering? How deep do you think Late Rain's foundation is? Even more, this was not over yet. After Late Rain spat out a mouthful of blood, he did not even pant for a moment. He roared furiously and jumped up, chasing towards Chu Yang. A series of fierce attacks like a storm suddenly unfolded in midair. Although Late Rain's mouth had been bleeding during this process, and his injuries continued to increase at every moment, at this moment, he did not care at all, as if he had gone crazy. He only had one thought in mind: to attack desperately. On the opposite side, Chu Yang roared, as if he was not to be outdone. He propped up his body and leaped into the air. When he opened his mouth, blood also gushed out continuously. Even his 7 orifices were spurting out blood continuously. He, who was seriously injured, also rushed up in a head-on collision. He collided with Late Rain's body in midair. The sword light soared into the sky, and the sword energy overflowed. With a boom, under this collision, a bottomless canyon was directly shaken out on the ground. The two people once again fought in the air, and no one was willing to retreat. The two people on both sides of the battle looked ferocious, and they did not care about their own safety. Like two mad bulls, they were crushing each other. Collision! And everyone watching the battle below could not help but stare blankly. Everyone felt goosebumps all over their body. Everyone had lived for so long, at least hundreds of years, and at most hundreds of thousands of years. What kind of battle scene had they not seen before? But it was really the first time in their lives to see such a fierce battle between these two people. Crazy. Chapter 2178. In midair, a strange situation appeared. Yuqi's left hand grabbed Chu Yang's right shoulder fiercely, and Chu Yang grabbed Yuqi with the same hand. Both of them actually had the same idea. Don't you fucking think of leaving. They actually fixed each other in midair just like that. Yuqi's other hand punched Chu Yang crazily. Every punch made Chu Yang spit out a mouthful of blood. The sound of bones breaking continued to ring out in a densely packed manner. And the calamity sword in Chu Yang's other hand also stabbed Yuqi's body without any regard for his life. From beginning to end, Chu Yang stubbornly only stabbed calamity sword into the same place on Yuqi's body. Every time he stabbed, Yuqi's body would emit a burst of white light, and he would spit out a mouthful of blood. These two people were attacking each other as if they didn't care about their lives. There was only one thought in their mind: you're dead. Bang, bang, bang. Puff, 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 puff. Everyone didn't know how many times they had heard such a sound before, but only this time, everyone's heart couldn't help but twitch violently with every sound. Their minds were shaken. The two people's bodies kept rising as they fought each other. Then, they gradually descended as they fought each other. In this process, Yuqi already didn't know how many punches he had thrown, and Chu Yang also didn't know how many swords he had used. Every sword seemed to be slaughtering the world, as if it had become a habit. Finally, when they were about 100 feet from the ground, there was a sudden puff sound in the air. It was like a cone piercing a balloon. Everyone fixed their eyes and looked over, only to see Chu Yang's face was full of ruthlessness. This sword actually pierced deeply through the protective white light of the saint's golden body, and deeply stabbed into Yuqi's body. All of a sudden, the protective white light exploded and scattered. The sword tip of Calamity Sword, with a bright bloody light, revealed half of it from Yuqi's back. It was shining brightly. Then, with a whoosh, it was retracted again, and from another position, the sword tip of Calamity Sword emerged again. Ah! Yu Jiao let out a long and mournful scream. Her entire body was trembling violently. Suddenly, she exerted strength in the air and the two of them flew up into the sky again. At the same time, Yuqi's fist also ruthlessly smashed into Chu Yang's face. Chu Yang's entire head was smashed to one side, and his cervical vertebra made a kacha sound. However, Chu Yang's hand sword still didn't have the slightest bit of hesitation, and continuously went in and out of Yuqi's body 3 times. Blood slowly fell from the sky, and landed on the ground. It gradually gathered into a pool, and no one could tell whether it was Chu Yang's blood or Yulei's blood. Both of them were bleeding profusely. Their mouths were full of thick bloody foam. Their heads, faces, and bodies were covered in blood. Some of it was their own, and some of it was their opponents'. At this moment, the two of them were already on the verge of death. However, the battle intent and ruthlessness in their eyes were not inferior to the other. Everyone's lips were tightly shut as they looked at the two people fighting. Not a single word was uttered. At this moment, everyone's hearts were filled with respect. Everyone on Yuchi's side regarded killing Chu Yang as their top priority. However, at this moment, seeing that Chu Yang could actually fight so ferociously, they couldn't help but feel respect in their hearts. Such an enemy could be said to be a terrifying existence that was like a nightmare in the heart of any enemy. However, it was also so respectable. As for Chu Yang's side, Tan Tan and the others looked at Yuchi's battle at this moment, but a sense of respect also spontaneously rose from the bottom of their hearts. No matter what kind of person this person was, or what kind of character he had, just by looking at this battle alone, Yuchi was worthy of the title of Deputy Commander Mo Yuntian. No matter whether he was forced to be like this, or for some other reason, as long as a man could fight and fight without regard for his life, then no matter who this man was, he was still worthy of respect. Now, the battle between these two people was no longer purely for victory or defeat, life or death, but for persistence. It depended on who could persevere more than the opponent. Even if it was a difference of one sword and one fist, the one who could persevere would be the winner. Both of them were now on the verge of collapse. The only belief that could support them was, I must see the other person fall first. This was a battle between men. It was already unrelated to life and death, and also unrelated to grievances and hatred. Such a way of fighting could only be described in one word: men. On Yuchi's body, there were already no less than 100 transparent sword holes. On Chu Yang's body, there were also large areas of collapse. It was obvious that his bones were completely shattered. With such injuries, no matter which side it was, they should have died 10 or even 100 times. However, under such an atmosphere, both of them chose not to make a move on each other's only movable arm. I'll leave you to fight. Let's see who can persevere first. Boom! Both of them finally fell to the ground at the same time. However, they were still holding on to each other. They stared at each other fiercely without blinking. Yuchi gritted his teeth and punched out again. He slowly hit Chu Yang's body. His fist no longer had any strength. However, when it touched Chu Yang's body, the force that might not even be able to crush and usually made Chu Yang groan in pain. Chu Yang slowly raised the calamity sword in his hand again and pierced into Yuchi's chest at a surprisingly slow frequency. It was as if he was doing a set of super slow movements. Unfortunately, he had clearly used up all his remaining strength, but he still couldn't pierce through Yuchi's chest. He could only slowly pull out his sword, obviously intending to change a place to strike. At the same time, Yuchi also slowly retracted his fist like an old man in his twilight years. Both of their movements were so soft and weak. However, their eyes were burning crazily, like a raging fire. Finally, when Yuchi's fist was retracted halfway, it hung down softly and couldn't be lifted again. Chu Yang slowly pulled his sword out of Yuchi's chest. His wrist shook inexplicably and the calamity sword almost fell to the ground. However, he gritted his teeth and roared silently. His whole body trembled as he lifted his sword again. Yuchi looked at the sword in Chu Yang's hand with furious eyes. His eyes were burning crazily. Chu Yang's sword moved forward inch by inch. During this process, the two people's eyes were fixed on each other. Suddenly, a smile appeared on Chu Yang's blood-stained face. His lips moved slightly, and he said in a weak but clear voice, "I won." At the same time, the sword in his hand slowly pierced into Yuchi's chest for the last time. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. Yuchi couldn't move at this moment. However, Chu Yang could still move and use his sword. Therefore, Chu Yang had won this battle. There was a roar in the sky. A clear voice sounded faintly in the cloudless sky. Chu Yang, Yuchi, Demon Emperor Heaven has witnessed the 7,754th battle between Saint cultivators. Chu Yang, who hasn't reached the Saint level, wins. Life and death, victory and defeat, leave it to fate. The bet is over. The promise of a monarch is witnessed by the heavens. The oath must be fulfilled and cannot be violated. The Oath Division finally made a verdict at this moment. Chu Yang won. Chu Yang, who hasn't reached the saint level, wins. The divine light in Yu Qi's eyes was still burning like a flame. He stared at Chu Yang. After a long time, the light in his eyes finally dimmed. He said as if he was moaning, "I've lost." His hand, which was originally tightly gripping Chu Yang's hand, suddenly loosened. His tall and sturdy body also suddenly swayed. Then, he fell backwards like a jade pillar toppling over a mountain of gold. "Marshal Yu! Marshal Yu!" Yu Qi's subordinates rushed up like lightning and supported Yu Qi's falling body. Yu Qi only said 2 words weakly. "Go back." Then he completely fainted. Chu Yang was still standing upright. He looked at Yu Qi's subordinates who were carrying Yu Qi. They glared at him with unconcealable hatred and left silently. But Chu Yang didn't move at all. Tan Tan was anxiously asking Chu Lur, "Girl, do you still have the elixirs that senior brother gave you? There should be at least 1 or 2, right?" Chu Lur pursed her lips. I. Tan Tan was so anxious that he stomped his feet. "No more? Yours is gone too? Why did you use all of them?" Chu Lur burst into tears. "I didn't notice." "Yours is gone too?" Tan Tan was dumbfounded when he heard that. 2 streams of tears flowed down his cheeks just like that. There was no doubt that Chu Yang had indeed shown his prowess in this battle. But he had also used up all of his life and all of his potential. In the end, every punch and every sword was squeezing out the remaining fire of his life to fight. No matter whether it was Chu Yang or Yu Qi, no matter who won or lost, it was very difficult for the 2 of them to survive. Unless Yu Qi had the precious secret elixirs that Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuan Tianji, had given her, she would definitely die. And it was the same for Chu Yang. If he didn't have the heavy elixirs, Chu Yang would definitely die too. But at this time, the heavy elixirs that Chu Yang had given to Chu Lur and Tan Tan when he ascended to Tian Ke had long been used up. What was worse was that Chu Yang, who was a big producer of heavy elixirs, obviously didn't have any himself. If he still had heavy elixirs, this battle wouldn't have been so miserable. The 2 of them had seen Chu Yang taking elixirs while fighting more than once. It was almost the same for every battle. They carefully went over to take a look, only to see Chu Yang staring blankly ahead. His pupils were already gradually dilating. "Big brother! Senior brother!" Chu Lur and Tan Tan shouted at the same time, hoping to call back Chu Yang's consciousness. Chu Yang didn't disappoint the 2 of them. He was more or less conscious. He muttered, "They left?" Chapter 2179. "He's gone! He's gone! We're all safe now!" Everyone was sobbing silently. Together with the 800 soldiers of the Dream Slayer army, they all knelt on the ground. For a group of people who used to be their enemies, this man who risked his life to save them. Everyone knelt on the ground piously, tears streaming down their faces. "Are they gone? Are they all gone?" Chu Yang asked in a daze. He looked as if he had been relieved of a burden. Then, his eyes, which were originally in a daze, suddenly shone with an indescribable sense of pride. "I won the battle with Yu Qi, who was at the peak of the saint level." He. Chu Yang sneered and said intermittently, "We're all men, and we only have 1 life. You dared to risk your life. Do you think I don't dare to? Ha 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 ha!" With a hoarse laugh, he suddenly fell straight backwards. He fell into the arms of Chu Lur, whose face was already full of tears. "My ribs are all broken. My sternum is broken, my skull is also broken, my neck is broken, my spine is broken, the broken bones have already been turned into thousands of fragments." Everyone checked Chu Yang's injuries and was speechless. No one could imagine how Chu Yang had managed to fight with such a tragic injury. Even if an ordinary person had 1% of Chu Yang's injuries, they would not be able to get up. But not only could Chu Yang fight, he could even persevere all the way until his opponent admitted defeat. He only collapsed after a long time. What kind of tenacity was this? What kind of shocking willpower was this? Looking at Chu Yang, who had fallen into a coma, everyone fell into a period of speechlessness. What an iron-boned hero! But the problem they had to face now was that Chu Yang's injuries were too serious. It was so serious that no one dared to move his body. They were afraid that he would fall apart if they moved him. This worry was not excessive or exaggerated. A certain king of hell's bones were broken and broken. If they were not careful, he would not be able to regain his human form. But now, there was no medicine to save him. Everyone was at a loss of what to do as they watched Chu Yang's breathing become weaker and weaker while he was unconscious. I have some medicine here, but I'm not sure if it'll work, Yao Ningning said. What kind of medicine? Tan Tan was overjoyed. Cut the crap. Take it out quickly, Chula urged her sternly. The little lass was already out of her wits, and she had to grab onto any straw that could save her life. Yao Ningning did not mind at all and said, This medicine was given to me by my Empress Mother. She said that it can save my life at a critical moment. I just don't know if it will be useful for such a serious injury. In any case, it's already like this. Using it should be better than not using it. As he spoke, he took out a purple jade bottle from his bosom. He carefully opened it and brought it close to Chu Yang's mouth. Just like that, a silvery liquid dripped out of the bottle. As soon as it came out of the bottle, the liquid emitted a dazzling light like the stars in the sky. The world was suddenly filled with endless fragrant spiritual energy. As if it had a life of its own, it automatically entered Chu Yang's mouth. Then, without any warning, Chu Yang's body suddenly shone with the brightest colors of the stars. It was as if all the stars in the sky had gathered on Chu Yang's body at this moment, blooming with endless light. It's the constellation soul-stealing liquid! Uncle Hu exclaimed. He turned to look at Yao Ningning, as if he could not believe the scene in front of him. Yao Ningning rolled his eyes and said, What's the big deal about this? Is it worth making a fuss over? Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma both stomped their feet and sighed. What's the big deal about this? Is it worth making a fuss over? What's the big deal about this? It's worth making a fuss over. This was a true, and insane prodigal. If the two uncles knew that this thing was given out by a certain someone, the two of them would definitely stop it. Even if they had to break off relations with Tan Tan and the others, they would still stop it. It was not that the two uncles were too stingy. It was really because this thing was really too precious, too rare, the constellation soul-stealing liquid was undoubtedly a unique treasure in the world. As long as one took this constellation soul-stealing liquid, no matter how serious the injury was, one could always hang on to one's last breath and not die. It could wait indefinitely for the medicine that the injured needed. This medicinal effect was not only suitable for ordinary people. Even if the descendants of emperories suffered injuries that could never be healed, they could also use the constellation soul-stealing liquid to maintain their vitality. Therefore, although the constellation soul-stealing liquid could not have an immediate effect, it was definitely a first-rate life-saving medicine in the Heaven Imperial Court. Once this medicine was taken, as long as there was no external interference, even if the injured wanted to die, they would not die. At that time, the Demon Empress worked hard and even took the huge risk of almost starting a war with the other Sky Emperors to get this bottle. This guy actually gave it away without batting an eyelid. If this matter was known by Her Majesty the Demon Empress, she would definitely immediately spank this unfilial person. After taking the constellation soul-stealing liquid, the effect was indeed amazing. Chu Yang's complexion instantly looked much better, and the essence energy in his body also started to circulate on its own. Although he was still in an unconscious state, the essence energy in his body already started to heal on its own. This was undoubtedly an extremely good sign. In Chu Yang's dantian that no one could see, those little golden people were all dispirited at this moment, almost on the verge of collapse. However, as the constellation soul-stealing liquid quietly entered their bodies, those little people suddenly became like people who had starved for 30,000 years and suddenly saw nectar. Without any explanation, they all started to crazily absorb it. As they absorbed, the power of the supreme true spirit in Xu Yang's body also started to gather again, gathering towards his dantian once again. Slowly, the golden liquid from before slowly appeared in the previously completely dried up dantian, and the spirits of the few little people also gradually became excited again. Along with wave after wave of breathing, traces of golden mist came out of their mouths and noses again, flowing through the meridians to all parts of Xu Yang's body. And wherever this golden stream of air passed, the severely damaged meridians started to recover bit by bit. Even those broken and crushed bones were glued together by an inexplicable mucus, and returned to their original places. Although this recovery process was slow, it was disorderly and well organized. Although Chu Yang was still unconscious at this moment, his complexion was getting better and better. After a day of not moving, a rare trace of blood actually appeared on his face that was as pale as paper. Until now, Chu Luer and Tan Tan could finally relax a little. During this period of time, the two of them had been by Chu Yang's side, not going anywhere, taking care of him without blinking. It was as if Tan Tan had drained himself of all his energy. He continuously poured his energy into Chu Yang's body. After his cultivation was exhausted, Chu Luer took over. Then, Tan Tan rested for a while before taking over. Meng Wuya's injuries were also very serious, and he was also in a state of unconsciousness, but at least his life was not in danger. Currently, the Dream Slayer army had nowhere to go, so they could only temporarily march with Chu Yang and the others. Not to mention anything else, Chu Yang, their savior, was still unconscious. Even if the Dream Slayer army was thick-skinned, they would still be embarrassed to just leave without saying anything. The group of people that Chu Yang and the others initially had more than 30 people, but in the blink of an eye, it had become close to 1,000 people today. Although they were marching majestically, their marching speed was as slow as a snail's. It wasn't until the afternoon of the second day that they had traveled less than 100 miles. They set up camp at the foot of a mountain, and prepared to rest. Yu Qi's injuries were about the same as Chu Yang's, so he was definitely unable to chase after them. Even if they didn't consider Yu Qi's character, just based on their injuries, everyone was still safe. Even if Yu Qi had the elixirs that Yuan Tianji had given him, it was impossible for it to reach the level of Constellation soul-stealing liquid, so his condition was definitely not better than Chu Yang's. Without Yu Qi's presence, they had to worry about the attack of the Tribulation Spirit, and it was impossible for it to counterattack. Although Yu's character isn't that good, but the words she said and the promises she made can still be counted as a promise worth 1,000 gold. An officer of the Dream Slayer army said. Since he promised to retreat, under normal circumstances, he definitely wouldn't go back on his words. After setting up camp, they first settled the two heavily injured Chu Yang and Meng Wuya. Then, everyone began to look around for food. If they had nothing to do, they set up a protective formation outside, and everyone sat down to cultivate and recover their own state. After checking on Chu Yang's injuries, Yao Ningning returned to his small tent. In the tent, besides the two elders, there was another person at the moment. He was full of a clear aura, and was standing solemnly, waiting for someone's return. When he saw Yao Ningning come in, he immediately stood up. Greetings, Grand Elder. You may dispense with the formalities. Yao Ningning waved his hand and sat lazily on the chair. I actually didn't ask you to come here for anything important. I just want to ask you about the real situation of the battle between my big brother Chu Yang and Yu Qi. After all, you are the representative of the Heavenly Patrol and judge the outcome. As the other party, you must have seen the whole process. This person was the master of the Heavenly Oath Division. After all, Yu Qi had made a bet with someone of Chu Yang's level. Of course, it wasn't something that ordinary people could witness, but the master of the Oath Division was destined to be the only exception. The four people's conversation didn't deliberately lower the volume of their voices, so what they were saying now, although they were in Yao Ningning's tent, everyone could hear it. At this moment, when they heard Yao Ningning's words, everyone's ears suddenly pricked up. This topic, everyone was too interested in. End of update. Sigh, I'm going to attend the annual meeting on the 13th again. These few days, I've been crazily saving manuscripts, but I'm afraid I'll still owe it by then. let me give my brothers and sisters a heads up in advance. If I really owe it, don't scold me. If I don't owe it, then reward me. Hee hee. Chapter 2180. Everyone was really curious about the situation of the battle between Chu Yang and Yu Qi on that mountain, and how it led to such a result. Chu Yang's strength was clearly much weaker than Yu Qi's, but when the master of the oaths department heard Yao Ningning's words, his expression immediately became very strange. He said with a faint smile, "What exactly do you want to know, Your Highness?" Yao Ningning said with great interest, "I want to know everything, no matter how big or small. You just have to start from the beginning and tell me everything you know." Well, the process of the matter is like this. On that day when the oath was established, Chu Yang's true cultivation was lower than his opponent's by 3 levels in the way of heaven's test. In other words, Chu Yang was only at the peak of the heavenly being realm, while Yu Qi was at the peak of the sage realm. The master of the Demon Emperor's Heavenly Oaths Department spoke slowly but clearly. Under normal circumstances, there's no need for such an oath in this duel at all. There's simply no comparison between the two. Yu Qi, who's at the peak of the saint level, should be able to easily kill Chu Yang with a casual palm strike. However, the Heavenly Way has unexpectedly acknowledged the existence of this bet. This has naturally aroused the great interest of our entire Oaths department. And the facts also proved that Chu Yang really had endless potential. He won a battle that was absolutely impossible to win in the end. He actually used different means to weaken Yu Qi's cultivation time and time again in the battle with him, so that the two of them finally stood in a situation of almost equal confrontation. The master of the Oaths department began to describe the entire process of Chu Yang's battle. He didn't even miss a single detail. He described in detail every word that Chu Yang had said, Yu Sha's reaction after each of his words, the extended meaning of each of Chu Yang's words, and Yu Sha's subsequent psychological conjectures. He didn't miss a single detail. He explained everything clearly one by one. It could be said that the current commentator, even Yu Qi herself, would not have thought of so many things. In the decisive battle, it's natural to pay attention to the words and deeds of the other party, and this is also the time when one's spirit is highly concentrated. But because of this, Yu Qi suffered a big loss in the end. Every word that Chu Yang says hides a special purpose. He is gradually leading Yu Qi's thinking to produce subtle changes with his words. Every subsequent sentence would push the effect of the previous sentence infinitely to the highest level. So, Chu Yang would be able to control Yu Gang's emotions from the very beginning. Especially when he calls out the names of his sword moves again and again, and every move is so fierce. Since Yu Qi was able to reach her current position, she is definitely a martial arts fanatic. How could she not be interested? And Delayed Rain's tragedy began when Chu Yang shouted out the name of the sword move for the first time. From then on, things got out of hand. Just like that, he used this kind of progressive method to distort black and white to plot against Yu Qi, causing Yu Qi's cultivation to continuously decline due to her injuries. In the end, she even lost her rationality due to anger. Hearing this, Uncle Hu couldn't help but ask in confusion, "This isn't right, right? You should know that it was a fair fight between the two of them. Isn't Chu Yang interfering with the battle situation by doing this? And his method is a bit too despicable. How can such behavior be done by a real man? Why didn't your Oaths department stop it?" "Stop it? Elder Hu, I'm afraid your words are unfair." "Ha." The head of the Oaths department looked at Uncle Hu with some inexplicable meaning, and smiled faintly. "Elder Hu, don't misunderstand. I'm afraid you have misunderstood something. Ha. Speaking of which, Elder Hu still has a strong Jianghu aura. You are very persistent in your chivalrous spirit." The meaning of this sentence was quite profound. Moreover, he didn't call Uncle Hu by his official position. Instead, he called him Elder Hu just like the old master, and even changed his surname. The meaning of this hidden meaning was very obvious. Uncle Hu's old face turned red, and he said angrily, "How am I unfair? Where did I misunderstand? Did I say something wrong? Elder Hu, The oath between the two of them was a battle of victory and defeat. They even said a few words about life and death. In other words, this is actually a battle of life and death. The head of the oaths department chuckled. What Chu Yang did was still a battle in essence, and not a simple scolding. Do you understand? Or I can say it more clearly. Using a saber to kill is killing, but using a sentence to kill is not killing, right? Using a saber to fight is fighting, but using a sentence or a few words to provoke the enemy's anger and disturb the enemy's fighting hard to achieve one's desired goal. This method may not be desirable, but in the end, it is still a battle. When two people are fighting on the battlefield, not to mention a sentence, even a look or an expression from the opponent can be a factor that disturbs and affects the battle situation. A sentence is also a battle. It is also a weapon. In a battle, the winner will live, and the loser will die. How can Chu Yang's actions be despicable? In a battle between enemies in this world, there is nothing they won't do. Each of them is desperately looking for a chance to survive on the road of death. This matter is only about life and death. What does it have to do with morality? Battlefield. The final victor is the winner. But Uncle Hu was a little stunned and didn't know what to do. If everyone were truly reasonable and moral, would there still be a war of weapons in this world? Why would there still be gratitude, grudges, hatred, and bloodshed? As for the talk of a fair fight, haha, this fight itself is extremely unfair. Chu Yang is 3 levels lower than his opponent at the start of the fight. How can it be fair? The master of the oaths department looked at Uncle Hu with some mockery. According to you, since it's a fair fight, then everyone should fight openly? If you can't beat me, you'll die? In that case, what else is there to fight in this battle? Everyone, just show your cultivation. Chu Yang is seriously no match for you. Wouldn't it be easier to just slit your own throat? Why are you still fighting? Your strength is weak to begin with. But you don't allow others to use tricks against you. Do you want Chu Yang to close his eyes and wait for death with this fair fight? Do you think so? The master of the oaths department's words made Uncle Hu's face and ears turn red. One's cultivation of vitality is one's strength, and so is one's attainment in weapons. But there's actually another most important strength. This strength is often the key that can affect the battle situation the most. That's the wisdom of the human mind. This is also a part of strength. And it's also the most important component of strength. Yu Qi's cultivation is 3 levels higher than his opponent's, and he has cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years longer than his opponents. In the end, he was still defeated by his opponent, and both sides suffered great losses. Just a few words can make him so angry that he's delirious. What's wrong with losing? The master of the oaths department smiled faintly. But this faint smile almost made Uncle Hu feel ashamed. Yes, just now, he only heard about Chu Yang's various despicable means, but he didn't think about the gap between the two's true strength. Just as he said, if Chu Yang didn't do this, what were the chances of Chu Yang winning? That wasn't even half of it, it was almost negligible. There was no need to fight this battle at all. He just needed to wait for death. Sigh. Uncle Ma let out a long sigh. But at the end of this battle, the bravery displayed by these two people was truly moving. Even now, thinking about that kind of battle still makes my heart tremble and my mind sway. The master of the oaths department smiled again. Elder Ma, you're wrong again. Wrong? What's wrong? Yes, it's wrong in the word bravery. From the beginning to the end, I only saw Chu Yang's bravery. How can I see Yu Qi's bravery? At best, he's just mad with anger and has lost all reason. Under such circumstances, can it be called bravery? Chu Yang, on the other hand, fought with his opponent so crazily in a situation where his mind is extremely clear. That's real bravery. Speaking of which, it's not that Chu Yang didn't have other ways to restrain Yu Qi, but in the end, he still accompanied him to such a decisive battle. This is the true respect for this fight, and also for Yu Qi. So, after Yu Qi was defeated, he didn't say anything. He immediately gave the order to retreat. Because he understood it himself. Chu Yang didn't have to do this, but he still did it. When you're weak, you can think of a way to equalize. But when you're evenly matched, I won't take advantage of you. Let's fight with our own abilities. Now Emoyuntian's army has already left Lone Bamboo City and is beginning to retreat to Emoyuntian. This is also the only thing about Yuqi that people can agree with. That is, he's a man of his words. And in the end, he didn't have any resentment. He must have thought it through. The words of the master of the Odes department set the final tone for this battle. At the same time, it also revealed the mystery in everyone's hearts. Whether it was Yao Ningning or the people listening outside, they were all enlightened. Thinking of the hardships of Chu Yang's battle, everyone sighed in their hearts. From being 3 levels lower than the enemy, to using all means to equalize the battle, finally, under the situation of being evenly matched, he abandoned the power of wisdom and fought to the death with the enemy, risking his life. And won the battle in the end. This process was really too difficult. And everyone also remembered a few other sentences. Everyone felt that they had benefited a lot. Using sabers and swords is killing, and it's a battle. But isn't the sentence killing a person also killing a person? Since it's a battle, then anything in the battle is a weapon. Sabers and swords are weapons. Isn't a sentence or a smile also a weapon? After writing this chapter, I hesitated for a long time before posting it. Because in my own opinion, this is an unnecessary chapter. Since the battle is over, what's there to explain? I thought everyone understood, but the truth is that many people don't. When the battle chapter came out, there was a wave of abuse. Book reviews were criticizing, Tiaba was criticizing, Weibo was criticizing, and there were even people directly criticizing on QQ. Everyone thought that Chu Yang should have fought Yuqi head-on. Fight fair and square. Can't stand it. I might as well explain this chapter. Chapter 2181. Although one's cultivation of vital energy is one's strength, and so is one's attainments in the sword and saber. However, there is another most important strength. This strength is often the key that can affect the outcome of a battle. That is the wisdom of a person's thoughts. This is also a part of strength. And it is the most important component of strength. Everyone seemed to have understood something as they chewed on these words. After answering Yao Ningning's question, the master of the Demon Emperor's Heavenly Oaths department left immediately. This big shot was also a person of high status and power. The Oaths department was a special department that was independent of the official system of the Demon Emperor's heaven. In the entire Demon Emperor's heaven, other than the Demon Empress herself, there were not many who could order this big shot around. This time, it was Yao Ningning, the unruly Grand Master, who asked personally. If it was someone else who wanted to inquire, not to mention whether they could find out, they might be accused of spying on the secrets of the Heavenly Oaths. It was just that before he left, he unexpectedly heard that Yao Ningning had given the Constellation Soul-Stealing Liquid to Chu Yang for consumption. His eyes actually lit up and he said something unexpected. Worth it! Too worth it! As the only person who had watched the entire battle, it was believed that no one knew the depth of Chu Yang's potential better than him. A person who was only at the peak of celestial being level was able to defeat a sage. What a terrifying existence he was. There was no doubt that it was an absolutely shocking surprise. If one were to say that Chu Yang's battle record was still a little vague and not very specific, then it could be compared to an example that was easier to understand. The difference in cultivation between Chu Yang and Yuqi was roughly equivalent to a first-grade supreme martial artist in the Chongtian continent suddenly exploding and killing Ningtianya after a round of fierce battle. There was no doubt that the difference in strength was really that big. That was why everyone who heard this result was so shocked. No matter what methods Chu Yang used in the battle, whether they were despicable, shameless, or despicable, it was undeniable that this was war. This was a place where all kinds of plots and schemes were used normally. It was still the same saying. If one didn't use it, was one waiting to die? But there was one thing that couldn't be denied. Other than Chu Yang, looking at the battle records of all the people from ancient times to now, in the world, There was no one at the peak of celestial being who could defeat a saint. What future did such a person have? Was there even a need to ask? If a person like Chu Yang were to die, all the experts in the world would be glad that there was one less terrifying person who could threaten them. But if he were to live, the impact would be even greater. At the very least, if you were to befriend such a person, and even if you were indebted to him in the past, it would be equivalent to having a permanent protective talisman. This person was willing to brave dangers alone for the sake of his subordinates. For the sake of his brothers, he was willing to risk his life. For the sake of his friends, he was willing to risk his life. For the sake of a person he liked, even if it was Meng Wuya who was once his enemy, he was willing to gamble and fight to the death. Once this person reached the level of a sage, who in the world would dare to touch his friends? He believed that once he moved, he would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. Yao Ningning's investment in such a person was really worth it. As the saying goes, only by being willing to part with something can one obtain it. Otherwise, how could he be the sole heir to the throne of the demon Emperor Heaven? He was too insightful. At this moment, the master of the Oath Department had a little reverence for His Highness Yao Ningning. It seemed that those rumors in the past were either smoke, self-humiliation, or the jealous slander of some people with ulterior motives. How could such an insightful and bold His Highness be as unbearable as the rumors? The master of the Oath Department had left too quickly. His thoughts were completely overshadowed by his own imagination. Yao Ningning did not know, nor did he think that the master of the Oath Department would think like this. To be honest, when he took out the constellation soul-capturing liquid, he did not have the slightest intention of investing. It was completely because he found Tan Tan pleasing to the eye, wanted to make friends, and was unwilling to let his friend die. That was all. The reason why Yao Ningning and Tan Tan could become friends was not only because of chance and coincidence, but also because of a very important similarity. Both of them had a pure heart that was ignorant of worldly affairs. Therefore, when these two idiots met, they were like tortoises and mung beans, and became idiots together. No one in the world could explain the two words fate and law clearly. Yu Qi had already led Mo Yingtian's men to withdraw by now. Once this piece of news was confirmed, everyone was instantly relieved. Not only Meng Wuya's Dream Slayer army, but also by Yu Qian and the others led by Chu Yang, all felt that a big stone had been removed from their hearts. No matter what Yu Qi would say after returning, the pressure from Mo Yingtian's side was completely gone for the time being. And this result, in the end, was not all because of Chu Yang's desperate battle. Everyone was well aware of this point. If it were not for Chu Yang, how could they have escaped from the previous 10,000 miles of pursuit? If it were not for Chu Yang's terrifying advancement along the way, how could they have the qualifications to negotiate with Yu Qi face to face? The long pursuit of more than 180,000 miles, with danger at every moment and death at every step, was all because of Chu Yang alone, looking for a trace of possibility in the impossible, and looking for a trace of hope in the land of death. Just like that, they rushed over. Recalling the hardships along the way, everyone felt as if they had had a bizarre and absurd nightmare. Even now, when they recalled the experience of that day, they often broke out in cold sweat and felt waves of lingering fear. Did he really come over just like that? Could it really come to an end for the time being? Everyone relaxed. Everyone had a surreal feeling. Some even wanted to cry. They really didn't know how they had come this far. If Chu Yang wasn't here to stabilize everyone's confidence, they probably wouldn't even need to be captured. They would have collapsed long ago, right? Meng Wuya finally woke up in the evening, which made everyone in the Dream Slayer army happy. After hearing about Chu Yang's matter, Meng Wuya was speechless for a long time. He did not say anything about his plans for the future, and only let out a long sigh. From today onwards, they would become vagabonds who couldn't return to their homes and would wander around the world. Yu Qi returned in defeat this time. It would be strange if she did not put all the blame on Meng Wuya when she returned. That day, he and the Dream Slayer army set foot in the eastern royal heavens in the name of arresting rebels. Now, he and his group had become rebels. The world was unpredictable, and the world was unpredictable. How could one know what would happen in the future? Right now, he could only take one step at a time. After Meng Wuya woke up, regardless of whether it was his expression or his expression, it was as if he had aged a few thousand years in an instant. His originally smooth and smooth face was now filled with wrinkles almost overnight. His hair, which was originally as black as ink, had turned a lot more white overnight. Seeing Meng Wuya's change, everyone sighed. They knew how he felt, but no one tried to console him. It was not that no one wanted to, but they were in no position to do so. They also lacked the words to console him. They really did not know how to console him. Meng Wuya knew that he had been loyal to Mo Yutian all his life. He had been loyal to Mo Yutian through life and death. However, at the last moment, he was framed and accused of being a rebel because of a groundless accusation. From then on, the creed that he had believed in all his life had collapsed. The goal that he had fought for all his life had suddenly turned into nothingness. He had become an enemy. Who could accept this? On the afternoon of the third day, a group of people was driving a carriage. They walked leisurely on the road. All the injured were sitting in the carriage. However, only 2 people needed to lie down, Chu Yang and Meng Wuya. Their journey was much more relaxed. They didn't have to worry about being attacked by enemies. Compared to the previous situation where they were in a state of panic and fear, the current situation was as carefree as heaven. However, everyone was very worried about Chu Yang's injuries. They really could not laugh. Since Chu Yang was injured, he had been in a coma. Although he had accidentally obtained the constellation soul-capturing liquid to save his life and stabilize his injuries, Chu Lur and Tan Tan Yi took care of him tirelessly. Yao Ningning and the others also came to visit him once in a while. They were all speechless. The injury this time was really too serious. Although the constellation soul-stealing liquid had a miraculous effect, it could save one's life without any worries. However, it was still lacking a few heavy pills that could restore one's soul and extend one's life. When it was time for lunch, Chu Lur was frowning. Her face was full of worry. After these few days, she had become a lot more haggard. "This big brother of mine is really," Chu Lur grumbled. "So many heavy pills have been distributed. He didn't even keep any for himself. Now, it's great that he's in a coma. It's obvious that he can be cured with just one pill." Tan Tan also sighed. "Don't you know his temper? Doesn't he share all the good things with everyone? Have you ever seen him enjoy anything alone? What's the use of complaining now? The problem now is how to find some suitable heavenly treasures so that my senior brother can wake up quickly." Chu Lur frowned. "Who doesn't understand this logic? But Yao Ningning and Tan Tan have been looking for heavenly treasures like dead dogs for the past 2 days. It's useless. This is his territory. He has tried his best to find them, but it's useless. No matter how much we want to, we can't do anything." Yao Ningning's dissatisfied voice came over. "Hey, Sister Lur, when did your handsome brother Ningning become so tired like a dead dog? Beauty, you have to have some conscience when you speak. I'm always full of energy and vigor." Chu Lur curled her lips in disdain. "Who's the one who needs someone to massage his legs every day? And he keeps complaining about being tired." Yao Ningning was stunned. Chapter 2182. These few people had already become very familiar with each other in the past few days. They didn't have any taboos when it came to joking. They dared to say anything. Tan Tan said in an eccentric manner, "I say, who are you? You're following behind that little sister by every day. You're like a shadow. Are you tired or not?" Yao Ningning's face turned red. "What do you know, my fair and virtuous lady?" Tan Tan clicked his tongue and said, "Why don't I know? It's you who doesn't know. It's fine if she has a little bit of interest in you. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any interest in you. You're clearly hot-headed. Yet, it's still so hot. TSK, your skin is really thick. Looking at the whole world, other than my senior martial brother, you're the only one with such a thick skin. In these few days, although Bai Shixian had been following Yao Ningning around all the time, the little girl's goal was very, very clear. She wanted to find the cultivation inheritance of the Wind Fox clan. With a certain woman like Guy, how could she not make use of it? Yao Ningning naturally patted his chest and agreed. But the problem was that the thing that the little girl needed was of a very high level. It was currently in the hands of the Demon Empress. Even if the Demon Empress agreed, they could only take it out when they arrived. And Bai Shixian, this little girl, was obviously ignorant of worldly affairs. So, she wouldn't act without seeing the rabbit. Who would believe you now? Anyone with the title of Tai really didn't have much credibility. So, Yao Ningning was very melancholy these few days. He was really worried. As long as he was with Bai Shixian, he could not say more than a few words, and the topic would turn to the Wind Fox inheritance. If he wanted to talk about something like romance, or tell a joke, this little girl would have a completely ignorant and adorable look on her face. She was indeed adorable, but… Speaking of that matter… Ha ha ha, it really made me laugh to death, Yao Ningning said. Yes, it's really funny. Brother Ningning, do you really have that inheritance you mentioned before? Really? Bai Shixian said. Speaking of that guy is really interesting. Ha. That's what happened, Yao Ningning said. And it's really interesting. Brother Ningning, can you describe to me the specifics of the inheritance? Bai Shixian asked. There's also that matter. I really went through a lot of trouble, Yao Ningning said. And it was really hard. Brother Ningning, what about the inheritance? Bai Shixian said. After a few exchanges, Yao Ningning lost all her strength and was defeated. This was the case almost every time they talked. She had already complained to Tan Tan more than once. Elder brother, tell me, do you have a saying like it's really hard to get through untold hardships? Yao Ningning had a helpless look on her face. This girl's way of thinking is completely different from a normal woman's. Everyone else should be laughing until they can't breathe, but she's just blinking her big, innocent eyes and asking about the inheritance very innocently. Tan Tan and Chulu were disdainful of this. You call those stories stories? You have the nerve to tell jokes. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about your eloquence. It's really not worth mentioning. Besides, have you ever seen a person who hasn't even laughed when he tells a joke? You haven't even started to tell the truth and you're already laughing yourself to death. The point of laughter is really are you doing performance art or telling jokes? Moreover, Bai Shixian had been following Mo Qingwu for a long time. So, I reckon that she had heard all those so-called jokes and stories from Chu Yang. So, I reckon that her ears would have grown calluses from listening to them for a long time. Most of them have been repeated, but you're still telling them with relish. The little girl didn't fall out with you probably because she's kind-hearted. She can't bear to see that you're tired from telling them. Taking 20,000 steps back, what you've said compared to Chu Yang's eloquence and experience, to put it in a less pleasant way, it's simply a pile of shit. Who would be interested in listening? Who would be interested in listening to it? To think that you think it's very interesting. You're still in high spirits. Not to mention the little girl, even the two of us can't bear to listen to it. Occasionally, when we listen to it, we have the mentality of it's really interesting to see Yao Ningning embarrassed. Brother Tan, you're saying that this is really strange. Yao Ningning looked miserable. Why is it strange? Tan Tan rolled his eyes and chewed on the stalk of grass with a bored look on his face. Why do you think it's so difficult for me to pick up a girl? Yao Ningning looked dejected and melancholy. I'm fucking weird. I have the family background, the character, the looks, the martial arts, the status, the figure, the elegance, and the temperament. How can I, wretch? Before he could finish, Chu Lur and Tan Tan were already vomiting so much that they were in a mess. If you want to be narcissistic, you can be shameless. If you want to be thick-skinned, you can be thick-skinned. If you want to be… Chu Lur continued. Yao Ningning's face instantly turned bitter. I say, sister, you don't have to hit me like this. No matter what, I'm still a grand member of the Heaven Imperial Court. Chuler's face turned cold. Let's not talk about anything else. Just based on the fact that you're a grand member, the little girl definitely won't like you. Think about it yourself. Are there any good people in the Heaven Imperial Court? Yao Ningning's face turned black. It seems that there really aren't any good people. No, I'm a good person. Lure was amused. She chuckled and said, You're a good person. You're a good person. You're still categorizing those who aren't good people as yourself. You're not that, you're that. Yao Ningning's face turned even darker. I'm really that. Why didn't I think of that? I'm really that. Tan Tan said seriously, which was rare for him. Yao Ningning, I'm telling you seriously. You can't do this. You have to do it that way. Yao Ningning was immediately energized. Big brother, quickly give me some advice. You're experienced and experienced. I'm counting on you. Please. Tan Tan raised his head and chuckled. He was very proud. Of course, of course. It's as easy as flipping my hand. Chulur looked sideways and said, Oh, Big Brother Tan is so experienced in certain things? It seems that you have a lot of experience. When I see Sister Dan Feng later, I'll definitely have a good talk with her. No wonder she's so dead set on following you. It turns out that you're so experienced. I don't know if you've hooked up with hundreds of girls? His face was even more bitter than a bitter gourd. He bowed to Chulur with his hands clasped in front of him. Grandma. I'll call you Grandma in the future. My poor old bones really can't stand the torment. Please open your eyes. Great expert, treat me as that and let me go. Yao Ningning's eyes widened. Big Brother Tan, didn't you say that you're the head of the family? Whatever you say is the law? Sister-in-law has never dared to reply. What's wrong with you? He hadn't even finished speaking when Tan Tan covered his mouth. You idiot! You deserve to be hacked to death. Are those fucking words that we brothers say when we're together? But isn't your sister-in-law's best friend here now? How can you say such words so casually? Do you want to fucking kill me? You idiot, I've enlightened you in vain. Why can't you even understand a little bit? It's over. It's completely over. Tan Tan's face was like that of an old society. He sighed deeply. When Yao Ningning heard this, she still persistently asked, You haven't taught me what to do. You, Tan Tan fiercely said. What to do? It's very simple. From now on, walk around naked in broad daylight. Especially, walk around in front of Bai Shixian. Use your specialty and maverick ways to move her. It'll definitely work. Besides this, don't eat when you're eating. You'll eat shit in front of her. I believe that she'll definitely fall in love with you. This is the secret to picking up girls that I'll teach you. Tan Tan shouted hysterically. He stood up, flicked his sleeves and left. You fucking exposed my secret in front of Chulur, Xie Dan Feng's best friend. You're making me look like I'll never see the sun again. You actually want me to teach you how to pick up girls? How did you figure it out? You're fucking crazy. Tan Tan had already left. Yao Ningning stared innocently. She was at a loss. She really didn't understand. Which sentence of hers had made Big Brother Tan angry? This, stripping and running around naked, doesn't seem like a good idea. Yao Ningning thought hard. She said to Chulur, As for eating shit, it's a bit too difficult. This is too hardcore. Would Bai Shixian really like it? Lur, your relationship is quite good. Do you like it? Chulur was originally out of breath from laughing at the farce in front of her. When she heard this, she stood up and stomped on Yao Ningning. She said angrily, You're the one who likes it. She turned around and left angrily. Yao Ningning scratched her head and muttered, You don't like it? I don't like it either. Not far away, Uncle Hu and Uncle Mao looked up at the sky. It was as if there were so many things worth seeing in the sky that they actually looked up and didn't move. Their Adam's apple bobbed up and down. It seemed like they were doing something. Eh? What's going on? Chulur had just entered Chu Yang's carriage when she screamed loudly. Hearing this, everyone immediately rushed over to check. Right now, nothing was more important than the situation in front of a certain king of hell. In the carriage, Chu Yang was lying down quietly as before. His face was full of tranquility. However, his body was continuously emitting layer after layer of mystical white light. This dense white light turned out to be the extremely pure spiritual energy of the world. It was like layers upon layers of a dense silk net covering Chu Yang's body continuously. It seemed as if it wanted to cover Chu Yang completely. Everyone looked at this shocking scene with their eyes wide open. They really couldn't understand what was going on. Chapter 2184. Time slowly passed as Tan Tan narrated. The sword spirit had also gradually understood everything. He heaved a long sigh of relief. So, that's how it is. So many things have happened during this period of time. But nothing too big has happened. The sword spirit came out for a while to understand the current situation. He also confirmed Chu Yang's condition. Then, he immediately returned to the tribulation space. The tribulation space had been unsealed. However, only the sword spirit could freely enter and exit it. Many people inside the tribulation space were eagerly waiting for Chu Yang's news. In particular, Tai Butian and Wu Qianqian had been asking questions every day. They had almost driven the sword spirit to collapse. The sword spirit had received the news. So, he had immediately returned to inform the two ladies. However, he was still feeling melancholy when he realized that the person outside had been injured. The sword spirit sighed and left. The sword spirit and the tribulation space were Chu Yang's secret and strongest trump cards. So, they couldn't be known by outsiders. Tan Tan knew this very well. So, he would naturally keep it a secret. Tan Tan was a bit stupid at times. However, his mouth was absolutely tight. Especially when it came to Chu Yang's matters. Tan Tan's mouth was as solid as steel. The sword spirit gave Tan Tan a heavy pill before he went in. Then, he solemnly warned him. These are the only pills we have for the time being. You see who has a more serious injury. You should take them first. It's an emergency. Tan Tan repeatedly promised that he would take care of it. However, Tan Tan immediately put all the heavy pills in his pocket after the sword spirit disappeared. Do a favor? This old man certainly won't do that. The one with the most serious injuries was Chu Yang and Meng Wuya. However, Tan Tan didn't have the slightest favorable impression of Meng Wuya, to be honest. Give him the heavy pills? Tan Tan would have thrown them into the toilet if they had belonged to him. After all, he wouldn't have given them to Meng Wuya to treat his injuries. There was also, this team belongs to senior brother Chu Yang. Senior brother is the soul of this team. Tan Tan muttered to himself. First of all, I don't have a legitimate reason to help them. Second of all, they may not appreciate it even if I save Meng Wuya. Third of all, it won't be as effective as senior brother's personal help. Since it's not worth it, then you should suffer for a few more days. In any case, you won't die, Tan Tan thought. Then, he felt more at ease. Tan Tan didn't want to move even more as he thought of this. As a result, Meng Wuya's recovery was delayed indefinitely. After that, there were no more storms. As expected, in the evening 3 days later, they finally arrived at their destination, Luohua City. Before they arrived at Luohua City, they had no idea why the city was called Luohua City. This was a city surrounded by mountains on all sides. Logically speaking, with the geographical environment surrounded by mountains on all sides, the city shouldn't be too big in theory, but this Luohua City was more than 10 million square meters. As long as you stood in the city, you could see the snowy scenery on the top of the mountains on all sides. But on the mountainside, you could see a myriad of colors. It was hard to tell what kind of flowers they were, but they were in full bloom on the mountainside of countless mountains on all sides. Moreover, the flowers in Luohua City didn't only bloom for one season. They bloomed in all 4 seasons. Spring orchids and autumn chrysanthemums were all beautiful. Spring was full of colors, summer was even more colorful, autumn returned to full of colors, and winter was still red and green. In short, there were all kinds of flowers blooming on the top of the mountains all year round. Whenever there was a gust of wind, petals would fall from the mountains and fall into the city. Every day of the year, there would be petals falling into the city for a long time. Therefore, it was named Luohua City. Every year, the falling petals were picturesque. Every month, the falling petals were poetic. Every day, the falling petals were like tears. Someone once wrote a poem about this. Looking at the falling petals in Luohua City, the falling petals stained the horizon. If the sky really has no tears, why bother to fall flowers in this city? As soon as everyone entered Luohua City, the strong fragrance of flowers that filled the air made everyone feel comfortable. It seemed that their hearts were also softened by the petals and the fragrance that filled their noses. "It's so beautiful here!" The two little girls, Chulu and Bai Shixian, were undoubtedly the most excited. The two girls' eyes were wide open, and their little faces were red. They were extremely excited. They raised their heads and opened their hands to catch the petals in the sky. Their laughter spread all the way. After being told about Chu Yang's current situation by Tan Tan, Chu Luer also returned to her playful character. How could she not enjoy herself in such a wonderful environment? Tan Tan was still sitting in the driver's seat, holding the horsewhip in his hand. He looked at the falling petals in the sky with disgust. He was speechless. "Fuck! What kind of broken city is this? Why didn't anyone clean up the garbage? These floating petals are really an eyesore." As soon as they heard this, they immediately mocked him. Everyone who heard this sentence glared at him angrily. There was actually such a person in the world. He was so poetic, dreamlike, picturesque, and illusory. But in this guy's mouth, it actually became a pile of garbage? And an eyesore? For a moment, whether it was the Dream Slayer army, Bai Yuchen, Yao Tai, and the two little girls who were especially angry, they all looked at Tan Tan as if they wanted to bite him into pieces. The pedestrians on both sides of the road also looked sideways at this ugly guy. Someone looked up to the sky and sighed. "It's no wonder that this brother has become so ugly. Some things are really subjective. But in the tens of millions of years of the Heaven Imperial Court's history, there has never been such a weirdo with looks. It's reasonable that he doesn't like Luohua City. If he also thinks that it's beautiful, then it's really an insult to Luohua City." This person's voice sounded faintly, but it caused everyone to burst into laughter. Tan Tan was furious. "Who is it? Who and where was it that spouted such bullshit? Come out and let me take a look at you if you dare. I want to take a good look at you." That voice laughed. "I don't dare to come out. I'm afraid that you'll think that I'm ugly when you look at me. Just consider me a coward." From afar, a gray shadow could be seen disappearing like lightning. Hearing this, Tan Tan was even more furious. He wanted to chase after it, but he forced himself to hold back. He kept scolding along the way. "Don't fucking fall into my hands. Little bastard, how dare you say that I'm ugly? What's wrong with your eyes? You're distorting the truth. You're full of lies." Everyone lowered their heads and forced themselves to hold back their laughter. "If you're not ugly, then there's no justice in this world. Luohua City. I'm here again." Yao Ningning's words were full of sadness. It was so strong that it almost condensed into substance. Even Bai Shixian, who had been hiding from him these days, couldn't help but raise her head and look at him a few more times. Yao Ningning looked up at the sky and sighed. His face was full of melancholy and loneliness. "In this Luohua City, how many times have I been rejected? At least 1,000 times. My nerves are tempered into steel here." Woo woo woo, everyone laughed and found an end to rest for the time being. Although the Grand Master didn't want to be too ostentatious, he kept saying that he wanted to keep a low profile. But when it was time to book the inn, everyone was shocked again. This Grand Master, who kept saying that he wanted to keep a low profile, actually booked the entire Luohua Inn, the best inn in Luohua City. "Are there any rooms left?" Yao Ningning raised his head. "There are still rooms, but there aren't many empty rooms," the owner said. "It doesn't matter. Drive out those who are staying here now." Yao Ningning raised his nose. "This, that, pa!" Yao Ningning threw a handful of purple coins on the table. "Is it enough?" "It's enough, but—" the owner frowned. "Pa!" Another handful of purple coins was thrown on the table. "Is it enough?" "Pa! Is it enough? Pa, is it enough?" In just a moment, Yao Ningning had piled up the counter with purple coins. This was purple cloud coins. With just 10 purple coins, one could book the entire Luo Hua Inn for a whole month and enjoy the best treatment. And this time, the Grand Master's generous action directly threw down no less than 10,000 purple coins. The innkeeper's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "It's enough, it's enough. I'll arrange it right away." The inn owner nodded and bowed. Yao Ningning said arrogantly, "If it's not enough, I'll continue to throw. If it weren't for the principle of keeping a low profile and not being too ostentatious, I would have directly smashed this broken inn with purple coins. If other people said this, it would most likely be an exaggeration. But no matter what this Grand Master said, it was 10,000% true. He would definitely do it." It was precisely because they realized this that the group of people behind all had black lines on their faces. They all turned their heads and looked around. Everyone's face had an expression of "I don't know him." Being together with this guy was simply embarrassing to death. No matter what, you're still the Grand Master of one side of the world. Why are your every move now like a nouveau riche who suddenly became an idiot after being smashed by a mountain of gold? Is this what you meant by keeping a low profile? Not being too ostentatious? Then what else do you want to be ostentatious? It had to be said that the majority of the customers fell for his trick. When the boss promised to pay them back 3 times the amount, everyone quickly moved out of the room. "Hurry up and clean up. Clean it thoroughly," Yao Ningning shouted arrogantly. Under Tan Tan's influence, Yao Ningning had learned the demeanor of a profligate son of rich parents very well. In fact, she had already surpassed her master and was even better than him. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma looked at Tan Tan with resentful eyes. "Our Grand Master was originally such a simple child. He had only been with you for a few days, and he had actually been infected by you to become like this. People say that one is stained by the company of ink, and one is stained by the company of pigs." Chapter 2185. Yao Ningning just stood in front of the door, and those customers who had left the restaurant walked out in front of him one by one. Some people couldn't help but size up this rich and overbearing super idiot and nouveau riche who had nowhere to spend his money. "What are you looking at?" Yao Ningning raised his chin. "Haven't you seen a rich person before? I've seen quite a few rich people before, but this is the first time I've seen an idiotic rich person like you. Today, I finally know what it means to be a nouveau riche. My horizons have been broadened," someone said ambiguously. Yao Ningning flew into a rage when he heard this. He was about to step forward and lash out at that person. But he was pulled back by Tan Tan. "Brother, using money to smash people is very satisfying. But it also depends on who you're smashing. What kind of people are you smashing? Hey, come. Let me tell you." He pulled Yao Ningning to one side. Finally, the day passed smoothly. Early the next morning, Yao Ningning woke up very early. He walked back and forth in the hall, out of the door, and back in. He was hesitating. Should he go and look for Zi Xieqing? His heart was really in a dilemma. Bai Shixian was sitting at one side, holding a book called The Secret History of the Holy Fox, and reading it with great interest. This book was given to her by Uncle Hu. It was Bai Shixian's first time coming into contact with the history of her clan. Naturally, she was reading it with full concentration. In the end, the Wind Fox was also a member of the Fox clan. Although it was more or less special, in the end, they were still of the same origin. The bones of the Wind Fox were still that of a fox. Bai Shixian sat quietly. Her white clothes and black hair seemed to have become a gentle scenery in the hotel hall. Yao Ningning was restless near the door. He didn't stop at all, which formed an extremely sharp contrast with her quiet self. Bai Shixian didn't look at him from beginning to end. All her attention was focused on the book. But Yao Ningning looked at Bai Shixian after a while. With one look, his heart was in a dilemma. He didn't know what to do. Even Yao Ningning himself did not realize that his mentality had already undergone a subtle change. Before this, he was madly pursuing Zi Xieching. Regardless of whether Zi Xieching paid attention to him or not, he would still shamelessly approach her and look for her. Even if he was scolded, beaten, or refused entry, he would still enjoy it. But now, he had actually begun to consider the question of whether to go or not. This was undoubtedly a huge change. Or rather, it was an improvement in a certain sense. In the end, Yao Ningning gritted her teeth, stomped her feet, and rushed out of the door. Destination: Falling Flowers Villa. Yao Ningning stepped on the petals all over the ground and walked to the door. Looking at the tightly shut door, she gathered her courage and shouted, "May I ask if Miss Z is here? I, Yao Ningning, request an audience." It was silent inside. No one answered. He called out again, but there was still no response. A graceful white figure appeared silently in front of him. "Oh, isn't this Ning? What's going on? Again? Ioyo, I really admire your infatuation." Yao Ningning didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "And can you not make fun of me like this? Do you really think I'm heartless and have no feelings? Besides, can't you just call me Ningning? Why do you have to call me Ning, such an unpleasant name? You little one, when did I make fun of you? I'm praising you." The beautiful woman in white laughed lightly. "What I said was the truth. After being shut out more than 1,000 times, you actually still have the courage to come here. In the entire Demon Emperor Heaven, no, I believe that even in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, you're the only one who can do that." Yao Ningning rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly. "Sigh. Ningning," the beautiful woman said seriously. "Aunt is telling you the truth. Let go. You have absolutely no hope." "Why do you say that?" Yao Ningning's face was cryptic. "Miss Z's heart should have already been taken by someone. She can't hold a second person. No matter how infatuated the second person is, it's meaningless." The beautiful woman in white smiled bitterly. Looking at her nephew, her beautiful face was full of pity. "Her love for that person is so deep that you can't imagine it. So, a woman's love will only be given to one person in her life. Once you give, there will be nothing left." The beautiful woman in white was a little disappointed. No matter how infatuated and outstanding the person after her is, this woman's heart has already been given away. No matter how good the person after her is, it will be of no use. It will be meaningless. Because this woman has already lost her heart. Her heart will only recover when she sees the person she loves deeply. The beautiful woman in white looked at the dumbstruck Yao Ningning and said slowly, "In the days when you weren't around, I had tea with Miss C many times. There was a banner hanging in her bedroom. Do you know what was written on it?" "What was written on it?" Yao Ningning asked anxiously. "The wind blows fast and the clouds are high in the sky. I travel alone to the ends of the world. If we meet again in the clouds, I ask you to sweep away the fallen flowers in Jiangnan." The beautiful woman in white recited in a long voice. She added, "That was written by Miss C herself. I've seen her pen." Yao Ningning only felt as if his heart had been hammered heavily. For a moment, his face turned a little pale. This poem was written by Zi Xieching and hung on the wall of his bedroom for a long time. What was the meaning behind it? It was almost indescribable. The wind blows fast and the clouds are high in the sky. It was nothing more than the dangers of the martial world. A woman's youth could only be wasted waiting in seclusion. The word seclusion was written with a kind of helplessness. "I travel alone to the ends of the world." This sentence was unrestrained, but the meaning of loneliness and desolation could not be concealed. The sun sets at the ends of the world. I'm alone, with only my sword as my companion. What kind of loneliness was that? Especially the mentality of a woman who longed to be protected and cared for. It was also expressed in this sentence. No matter how strong a woman was, she was still a woman. She needed a man's protection and care. Although Zhi Xiecheng was strong deep in her heart, what was the difference between her mentality and that of an ordinary little girl? If we meet again in the clouds, I ask you to sweep away the fallen flowers in Jiangnan. This sentence contained more of a kind of hope, a kind of desire, or a promise. Luohua City, south of the Misty River. Back then, after Zhi Xiecheng's cultivation was greatly damaged due to the transformation of her martial arts in the Demon Palace, she came here regardless of everything. Since she came here, she only focused on cultivation and never went out again. Perhaps the rest of her life was only left with waiting. Waiting for the person who made her make a promise to herself. As long as we meet again in the clouds, this flower will be picked by you. As long as you can come. The meaning of this sentence was very clear, and there was no concealment. It's just that I don't know who is so lucky to be able to get her favor, a sincere favor. Yao Ningning was disappointed for a long time before he muttered to himself. I really envy this lucky guy. I also sincerely hope that Miss C can be happy. If I can see this person one day, I must have a good drink with him. Tell him to take good care of Miss C. Yao Ningning sighed sadly, only feeling that her feelings were flowing away like water, never to return. No matter who this lucky person was, there was one thing that she was sure of, that person would definitely not be her. No matter how long she waited, it would not be her. The beautiful woman in white looked at Yao Ningning and finally couldn't help but sigh. Then she felt a little surprised, although Yao Ningning looked a little disappointed now, and even lost, but the extent of her sadness didn't seem to be as serious as she thought. Logically speaking, Yao Ningning should be in so much pain that she would rather die. Could it be that this little one's so-called infatuation was nothing more than this? Or was it a moment of enlightenment, and no longer infatuated with the wrong person? If it was really the latter, it could be considered a good thing. Coincidentally, at this moment, there was suddenly a noisy sound of footsteps from afar, as if a large group of people was rushing over here. Listening to the sound, there were actually a few hundred people. Who are these people? Yao Ningning turned around and looked at the beautiful woman in white. She had stayed here for a long time before, so she knew this place very well. It was a 100% quiet place, and there was rarely such a big commotion. Could it be that Miss C had offended someone? These people were here to find trouble. If that was the case, she definitely couldn't tolerate it. It's a fool who came. The kind that is even more foolish than you. It's really rare to find someone who is more foolish than you in this world. Coincidentally, there is one here. The beautiful woman in white couldn't help but laugh. But speaking of which, you are actually not too foolish. You are probably just lacking a bit of brain, but this person is purely foolish. There's such a thing. Yao Ningning's gaze was fixed. Although she didn't know whether the beautiful woman in white was praising her or belittling her, she was a little interested in the person who wanted to do that with her. What kind of person could actually get such a high evaluation? She really wanted to see who it was. Then she saw a large number of people, each holding a huge bouquet of bright red roses, tender and beautiful. Then there were some people carrying a rack, which looked like a construction team, and then they were busy in front of the falling flowers courtyard. Not long after, a large-scale high platform was erected in the air. It was 50 feet high, and it was more than 100 feet wide. Then, those who were holding the roses flew up and started to work on it again. Teleporting, transporting, pulling out a fancy bouquet. Following which, the roses were arranged neatly one by one, making them even more stable. It could be seen that they had done this more than once. Everyone was very familiar with it, and they were very familiar with the business. Still, not long after, so many roses had all been put on the top of the rack, and in an instant, the area with a radius of several hundred feet was filled with a strong fragrance. All the bright red roses were arranged into 5 bright red words at the top of the rack. Miss C, I like you. Chapter 2186. Gao Laozhuang is brilliant. Yao Ningning was actually convinced. Why didn't I think of this idea? Who is this? How could he be so talented? Yao Ningning stared at the mountain like roses with her mouth agape. For a moment, her mouth was crooked and her eyes were slanted. She couldn't even speak properly. You'll be able to see that talented person very soon. I've seen this kind of scene every day in the past few days. The beautiful woman in white pursed her lips and smiled. Apparently, she was used to this kind of scene. The scaffolding workers and flower workers quickly retreated like a tide. The front of Falling Flower's hut was empty and quiet again, except that there was a tall shelf with tens of thousands of blooming roses on it. A light breeze blew, and that intoxicating fragrance filled the air. In the next moment, a voice rang out, dragging out the words as he recited, "Since ancient times, who has not died? Seeing a beauty whose surname is purple, I can't forget her even in my dreams. I've specially come to visit you. You know how deep my love is, I've come to pray to the heavens. If you can open the door, my love is deeper than the eastern sea." That voice seemed to be rhythmic and full of affection. Obviously, this person's feelings were very involved. Moreover, when he was singing, he should be singing while shaking his head. His voice was full of emotion. Even with Yao Ningning's foolish state of mind, after hearing this poem, he couldn't help but feel a layer of goosebumps all over his body. He subconsciously shivered and said, "Too talented, truly too talented." The beautiful woman in white tried her best to keep a straight face. She hoped that she could maintain a dignified appearance, but she almost laughed out loud. It seemed that it was even more disgraceful than not deliberately trying to be dignified. Following the end of the long chant, under Yao Ningning's dumbfounded gaze, a person walked in unsteadily from the small path, stepping on the falling flowers. He was really graceful, but he seemed to be a little silly. The man's long hair was not tied up. It was just hanging loosely on his forehead. He was wearing a five-colored robe and a huge cloak. The cloak was draped over his body. The hem of the cloak dragged on the ground for half a foot. As he walked over, it really seemed like he was sweeping the floor. When Yao Ningning saw the appearance of the person who had come, she immediately burst out laughing. Yet that guy still had to put on a suave appearance. He thought that he was very suave, but he was actually very silly. This person had a big aquiline nose, and his two eyes were darting around. His face was serious, and his skin was fair and clean. However, his complexion was a bit green and yellow, and it was obvious that he had drunk too much wine and women. As for this guy's biggest highlight, it was that he was very tall. Yao Ningning was close to 1.8 meters tall, but this guy was actually 1.5 heads taller than her. He was really quite tall. However, although this person was tall, he did not have much flesh on his body. He was very, very skinny as a stick. As he walked over, he really looked like a bamboo pole. Wearing a robe, he swayed as he walked over. Yao Ningning estimated that if she cut off this person's entire body, the amount of flesh he had would definitely not exceed 3.5 kilograms. This person's dressing was really indescribably strange, but looking at this person's behavior, he actually felt very good about himself. He felt that he was very graceful. Wearing clothes and a hat, he was indeed a person of character. Outsiders really could not appreciate a person's preferences in clothes. Obviously, he had already seen Yao Ningning and the beautiful woman in white standing at the side, but this person actually walked over without looking sideways. He was also disdainful of the demon race's grand mistress. He walked straight to the huge rose rack and said in an extremely gentle and sweet voice, "Miss Z, I am Tang Yangwei, and I am here to see Miss Z again. I wonder if the poem I have recited today can catch Miss Z's eye." Yao Ningning moaned at the side. "Mother! No wonder this guy recited it with so much emotion. It turns out that it is a poem. I really can't tell. Where is the poem?" The beautiful woman in white coughed hard and once again suppressed her laughter. "Continue watching. The best part is yet to come." After Tang Yongwei finished speaking, there was still no sound from inside. This was normal. Previously, a certain grand mistress had thousands of wonderful plans and treasures. How could she be moved in the slightest? Seeing that there was no movement inside, Tang Yangwei rolled his eyes and continued. Miss C, these are thousands of roses that I have personally picked. It represents my sincerity. Please enjoy it. Yao Ningning turned her head and her face was extremely distorted. Personally picked? Who are you trying to fool? Do you even believe your own words? Not to mention thousands of roses. Just looking at this guy's appearance, if he could pick one with his own hands, he would probably be injured by the thorns. There was still no movement inside. Tang Yangwei took 2 steps and swept the huge cloak on the ground again. He muttered, If Miss C is willing to come out and meet me, I will be extremely grateful. Why don't I compose a poem for Miss C to express my sincerity? How about it? As he spoke, without waiting for the person inside to reply, he shook his head and seemed to be brewing his emotions. Then, he opened his mouth and said, Miss, I love you like a worm loves rice. My love for you is as deep as the ocean, as real gold. My heart is filled with you. I am happy to see you. Miss, quickly open the door. I want to have a heart-to-heart talk with you. When Yao Ningning heard this poem, she felt as if she was struck by lightning. Her internal organs were burning and her liver and gallbladder were splitting. An inexplicable impulse to kill someone surged in her heart. It was not because of the love rival who had snatched her away, but because she was really disgusted by these 2 poems. There were many people who ruined poems in this world, but none of them could ruin it so thoroughly. Who on earth is this guy? Why is his class so exaggerated? Yao Ningning's face was distorted. She forcibly resisted the urge to vomit and turned to ask the beautiful woman in white. How many people can have such extravagance? He is from the Tang family, the largest family in Luohua City. The beautiful woman in white was obviously having a hard time. She had more experience than the previous one, so her situation was better. But she still rolled her eyes and said, This is the 3rd son of the master of the Tang family. His name is Tang Yangwei, and people call him the 3rd young master of the Tang family. The 3rd young master of the Tang family? Yao Ningning rolled her eyes disdainfully. What a waste of a good name. This guy is like a stupid bird. He actually wants to pursue Miss C. Alas, the world is so big, and there are so many strange things. By the way, how did he meet Miss C? The beautiful woman in white couldn't help laughing. She said, The world is unpredictable. This guy is also a weirdo. That day, Miss C went out to buy some special medicinal materials and happened to meet Mr. Tang. When Mr. Tang saw Miss C, he was shocked and fell head over heels for her on the spot. Since then, this situation has been repeated many times. Yao Ningning said with a little jealousy. This guy's feelings are so fragile. Did he fall in love at first sight? It is said that the 3rd young master of the Tang family has many beautiful women in his family. Now he has more than 20 wives and more than 300 concubines. He calls himself the 3rd young master Tang, who is lascivious but not obscene, romantic and elegant. The beautiful woman in white sighed. Since I saw Miss C that day, this person has been coming here almost every day. Every time he comes, he brings so many flowers. In just 1 month, he has spent tens of thousands of purple cloud coins just to buy these roses. Fortunately, he is in Luohua City, where roses can be found. But I think in a few days, no matter how much money he has, he won't be able to find roses. What a rich man! Yao Ningning said disdainfully, and then stomped her feet angrily. Damn the nouveau riche! That's not all. It is said that since the 3rd young master of the Tang family saw Miss C, he has been obsessed with her. After returning home, he didn't like any of his concubines. He even inexplicably lost his sexual ability. The beautiful woman in white blushed slightly, but she couldn't help laughing. What? So exaggerated? So, this guy is determined to win Miss C's heart, isn't he? Whether it is for himself or for that thing, he has to. Yao Ningning's eyes widened. She felt more and more incredulous. It seems so. The beautiful woman in white smiled faintly. But I don't need to reckon that he won't stand a chance. Even you don't stand a chance, much less him. Yao Ningning breathed a sigh of relief. And you are right. If I lose to this stupid guy, I'll just kill myself. It hurts my self-esteem too much. Tang Yangwei had finished reciting the poem. Seeing that there was still no movement inside, he finally couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. After waiting for a while, he said, Miss Z, do you want me to compose another poem for you? There was still a long silence. It seemed that Zi Xieching had made up her mind not to speak. Tang Yangwei finally felt a little bored at this moment. Besides, he had been racking his brains for so long, and there was no poem at all. So he turned around unsteadily, sighed, and was about to leave when he suddenly saw Yao Ningning. At this moment, Yao Ningning was staring at him with her mouth agape. Obviously, she couldn't understand this guy's stupid behavior. Tang Yangwei frowned. He actually walked over and scolded Yao Ningning. What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a rich person before? Yao Ningning was stunned by the question. She couldn't help but stretch her neck. In the Demon Emperor's heaven, it seemed that this was the first time a certain grand prince had met someone who dared to say such words to the Demon Emperor. Although this Tang Yangwei didn't know Yao Ningning's true identity, but to be able to say such words, it was obvious how awesome he was. I see rich people every day, but it's really my first time seeing such a stupid rich person. Yao Ningning suddenly remembered that someone had said this to her before, so she blurted it out. Chapter 2187. Tang Yangwei was furious and said, Where did you come from? How dare you? How dare you talk to me like that? Do you know who I am? Tang Yangwei was the first person who could ask the Demon Emperor Tiantai in the Demon Emperor's heaven. Do you know who I am? Once again, he made history in the Demon Emperor's heaven. Who are you? Are you the Demon Emperor Tiantai? Yao Ningning looked at him, while touching his chin, and asked with interest. He. Although my identity is not as good as the Demon Emperor's, in this Luohua city, I am the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor of Luohua City. The Tang family's third young master said with his nose in the air. I thought a country bumpkin like you wouldn't know how powerful I am. How dare you call me Demon Emperor? Yao Ningning sighed. He wanted to slap him to death, but after thinking about it, he didn't do so in the end. Looking at the Tang family's third young master's anxious face, Yao Ningning suddenly had a feeling of sympathy for him. In that instant, he felt like a fox mourning for the death of a rabbit. This brother is also a pitiful person. Just like me, he was eliminated before he even entered the game. I am better off. After all, I still have some manly functions. But this Tang Yangwei, this Tang family's third young master, is really impotent. He's much worse than me. In that case, I won't be angry with him anymore. He sighed and said, Brother, I know very well who you are, but you definitely don't know who I am. As a person who has experienced it, I sincerely advise you to give up. You definitely have no chance. Look at me, I'm much more handsome than you, right? I've been pursuing her for several years, but I still have no chance. You don't count on her. Hearing this, the Tang family's third young master became spirited. He took 7 or 8 steps forward and looked at Yao Ningning up and down. You've been pursuing Miss Z for several years? No chance? Suddenly, he burst into laughter. Ha ha! Yao Ningning immediately covered his nose and stepped back 7 or 8 steps, almost suffocating to death. The Tang family's third young master didn't get close before, but when he got close and opened his mouth, a strong smell of garlic suddenly gushed out. Even with the fragrance of tens of thousands of roses enveloping the atmosphere, it still could not be suppressed. It was simply too smelly, Yao Ningning confessed on the spot. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. He said, You motherfucker, stay away. Tang Yangwei grinned and said, That's it. No wonder you can't get any beauties. You don't even have the ability to bear this much, and you still have the nerve to sincerely persuade me. I sincerely despise you. Baring his teeth was not a big deal, but his mouth was full of yellow. Just now, it was a taste invasion. Now, it was a visual destruction. The effect was shocking and shocking. You are ruthless! Yao Ningning couldn't hold on any longer after 2 consecutive moves. She immediately covered her head and fled like a rat. She really didn't have the courage to continue fighting. As a native of the Demon Emperor's heaven, this Tang family's 3rd young master could be considered the first person in history to be able to make the Demon clan's Grand Master flee like a rat. The beautiful woman in white didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she followed him. However, she saw Tang Yongwei talking to himself proudly. As expected, the moment I appeared, this rascal immediately fled at the sight of me. He went back proudly. Before he left, he didn't forget to shout, Miss Z, I will come visit you again tomorrow with a new poem. His cloak slowly dragged on the ground as he left in an even more foolish manner. When the beautiful woman in white caught up with Yao Ningning in a few steps, she saw a certain Grand Master vomiting violently while leaning against a flower tree. Ugh! 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 Is there a need for that? The beautiful woman in white frowned. His mental endurance seemed to be a little too weak. My dear aunt, don't you know about that little terrifying trick? I didn't hold my breath in advance and was directly plotted against. Yao Ningning vomited all over the place. The moment that guy opened his mouth, it smelled like a toilet. No, it was even stronger. I couldn't resist it. Ugh, there are all kinds of people in the world, and there are all kinds of strange things. It is said that although this guy is extremely promiscuous, and it is common for him to flirt with women, he has never forced any women to follow him. All the women who followed him did so willingly. The beautiful woman in white said, This is probably a good point, right? As for his tone, this person has a hobby of eating garlic every meal, so, according to him, garlic is the most common heavenly treasure. The beautiful woman in white smiled reservedly. So, every time I come to Luohua City, I directly block my breath and only reactivate it when I leave. So, Yao Ningning looked up to the sky and sighed. At this moment, suddenly, an awe-inspiring aura filled the whole world without any warning. Seeing this, both of them were shocked and looked for the source of the aura. They saw that in the sky, the wind and clouds were roaring and rushing toward Luohua City. There were faint flashes of lightning and roars of thunder, and the wind was roaring. The petals on the mountains in all directions suddenly fell down. The whole sky above Luohua City was suddenly filled with a stronger fragrance of flowers. It was really a magnificent scene. A majestic white light broke through the heavens and the earth, rising into the sky and soaring into the heavens. An indescribable sense of holiness suddenly surged out like a raging tide, filling everyone's heart. Suddenly, an egg-shaped canopy slowly fell from the clouds. The clouds move, the wind and clouds dance, the canopy falls, and the thunder is furious. The beautiful woman in white looked very serious. A new sage has been born. No way, someone has broken through to the sage level in Luohua City again? Yao Ningning asked in disbelief. The beautiful woman in white took a deep breath and said, Yes, other than this, no other breakthrough can cause a bigger commotion. In this world, only a warrior at the peak of the heavenly being level breaks through to the sage level. Can the canopy fall and cause the wind, clouds, and thunder to rage together? But who on earth broke through the bottleneck and reached the sage level? The beautiful woman in white frowned and thought hard. She looked up at the canopy that was slowly falling from the sky and said seriously, Ningning, look carefully. Where will the canopy fall in the end? When a sage breaks through, the closer it is to the ground, the blurrier it will be. In the end, it will be impossible to see it clearly. When it touches the ground, it will completely disappear without a trace and become invisible. Yao Ningning stared at him without blinking. She didn't even breathe loudly. The canopy of the sage level was a unique phenomenon that only appeared when one broke through to the primary level of the sage level. This proved that there was one more immortal top master in the world. In the future, even if this person could break through to the advanced level, there would not be such a miraculous scene. The aunt and the niece looked at the huge sky slowly descending towards Luohua City. It was getting closer and closer, and its color was getting fainter and fainter. However, the holy chi was getting stronger and stronger. In Luohua City, all the demons below the heavenly being level knelt on the ground at the same time. In the face of such endless power, the demons were more in awe than the humans. It was a natural sense of fear for the strong. Some of the people who still had the energy to raise their heads and look at where the egg-shaped sky was going to land. In the face of such power, even the beautiful woman in white, who had broken through to the primary level of the sage level, could not move at all. She just stood there and did not feel the pressure. However, as long as she moved a little, the way of heaven would regard her as someone who wanted to destroy the birth of a sage, and it would target her. In the sky, the wind and clouds were turbulent. Tens of thousands of miles of wind blew the clouds and fog, and all of them were rolling toward this place. It was getting closer and closer. Yao Ningning stood there motionlessly with her eyes wide open. Suddenly, she let out an extremely surprised cry. This. The egg-shaped canopy, which was fainter and fainter, was moving toward the place where the two of them were standing. Then, it turned into nothingness. At the same time, the color of the sky turned black in an instant, as if it was dyed with a layer of ink. In the next moment, countless black lightning struck down in such a boundless dark atmosphere. The clouds were flashing with extremely dazzling silver lightning, but in the end, it turned black again. Black lightning. It was a special punishment that could only be triggered when one broke through to the sage level. The aunt and the niece looked at each other and felt an extremely strong shock. It was coming toward them. Could it be that the one who broke through this time was Zi Xieching? In the next moment, the whole Luohua city started to vibrate silently. Even if Di and the Empress were here, they would also fall into an extremely dark place where they couldn't even see their own fingers. Yao Ningning and the beautiful lady in white looked at each other. They were the two people who were closest to the Luohua city at this moment. They could clearly feel that the strongest vibrations were coming from the Luohua city. In this case, it was actually Zi Xieching who broke through to the sage level? The woman in white had a look of disbelief on her face. It's really inconceivable. I remember the last time I saw her, she was only a high-level celestial, and she had just reached that level. How could she improve so quickly? Yao Ningning looked depressed, as if she had lost her parents. Originally, the distance between her and Zi Xieching was already far enough. Now, Zi Xieching was even further away. Zi Xieching had actually advanced to the sage level and became one of the most powerful people in the world. This achievement couldn't be achieved just by accumulating spiritual energy. How many people had reached the heaven level when they were young, but they still couldn't break through the bottleneck of the sage level in their whole lives, even after tens of thousands of years? How many amazing people had stopped at the peak of the celestial being level when they were old? They were obviously only one step away from breaking through to the sage level, but until they died, they still couldn't make that step even after hundreds of thousands of years. But Zi Xieching was actually able to break through from the heaven level to the sage level in such a short period of time. In this room, there was actually no obstruction at all. She didn't encounter any bottleneck. It was as normal as eating and drinking, and she broke through just like that. Chapter 2189. The sky was black, and the lightning was black. Everything was black, and it was even darker than the boundless night sky. When one first reached the sage realm, there was a special law of the heavenly Tao that confirmed that no one could move in the city he was in. Even sages were no exception. This was the unique power of a sage realm expert, or rather, it was a symbol. As far as martial artists were concerned, there was always the possibility of being disturbed and going berserk when breaking through to any level below the sage realm. This was something that could not be avoided no matter how amazing the mental state of the cultivator was or how good the cultivation method was. However, when one broke through to the sage realm, there was no need to worry about this at all. The opponent one had to face was no longer a human, but the heavens and earth. Fighting with others was endless fun. Fighting with oneself was endless fun. Fighting with the heavens and earth was the only way to survive. The sage tribulation was the most dangerous at the beginning. In other words, although one did not have to worry about being disturbed by enemies, it was also not easy for one to cross this hurdle. Because at the delicate moment when one was breaking through to the sage realm, because there was the heavens and earth as witness, one's aura was boundless and majestic. But at the same time, one had to bear twice the heavenly might. This level of danger was basically equivalent to death. The beautiful woman in white was the best example. Although she had experienced this process before, and her cultivation had already surpassed this level by more than a level, she could not move in the face of the heavenly might. As for Yao Ningning, she could not move even more. The two of them just stood there. Although they could not hear anything, they could clearly feel the heavens and earth trembling. It was as if they could not see anything. But when they closed their eyes, they could acutely feel the space being torn apart. The two of them were worried about the person who was breaking through, but they also smiled bitterly. They did not expect to come here today to accompany someone in the sage tribulation, and they were just standing there. This encounter really made them speechless to the extreme. Even if they were a little further away, at least they could walk around in a small area, or lie down for a while, or sit down and drink tea. But now, look at what's happening. Of course, the situation of these two people was not the most miserable. Because the most miserable person was the Tang family's third young master. After General Tang left the Falling Flowers villa, he had only taken a few steps when the heavenly might arrived. Duke Tang Yang, who had a weak cultivation base and had never seen such a terrifying heavenly might, was so scared that he screamed and ran away. Once he ran, the heavenly might immediately increased its attention, and Duke Tang was forced to the ground by the tremendous pressure. Like a toad, he couldn't move at all. Everything around him was pitch black. It was as though the heavens and earth were trembling. That kind of boundless pressure gradually converged into an extreme fear. Tang San Gong's face was filled with fear. What's going on? The inside of Falling Flower Villa was already turned upside down and full of devastation. Zi Xieching, who was dressed in white, was sitting in the courtyard. Her whole body was emitting a dense white light. No matter how the black lightning struck her body, her face was as calm as usual, as if the terrifying black lightning was not targeted at her. Outside the tough and holy white light protecting her body, it was as if there were countless black snakes dancing around her. The black lightning became more and more intense and denser, but Zi Xieching sat there motionlessly. There wasn't even a trace of pain on her face. Under the cover of the tremendous darkness, the holy white light became more and more inconspicuous, but that white light still didn't extinguish. Although there were a few times when her body started to emit black flames, they were immediately extinguished by the holy white light that appeared again. The petite body that continued to emit the holy white light and the black lightning that filled the heavens and earth were like dots of white light, fighting against the darkness of the entire world. Dots of white light, never ending. The sound of thunder was faint and didn't seem to be strong, but the surrounding pressure was getting stronger and stronger, and the power was also getting stronger and stronger. After a long time, the heavenly might finally showed signs of weakening. The beautiful woman in white and Yao Ningning heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. It seemed that Zi Xieching was going to pass through this heavenly punishment without any problems. At the same time, the miserable situation where the two of them couldn't move at all was finally going to end. Now is the best time to show the benefits of cultivating one's body into a human. The beautiful woman in white let out a long sigh. If she insists on breaking through to the level of a sage with her demon body, then the heavenly punishment she will encounter will be many times more intense than now. It will be really difficult to pass through it. Yao Ningning nodded in agreement. As a direct descendant of the demon clan's royal family, he naturally knew this very well. Speaking of which, Zi Xieching's speed of improvement after cultivating her body into a human is really a little abnormal. Maybe there's something strange about this. The beautiful woman in white pondered. Her speed of improvement shouldn't be like this. Even if her original strength is not weak, this kind of recovery speed is still unimaginable. What is going on? Yao Ningning smacked his lips and said, Maybe Miss Z is a genius, and her perseverance in cultivation is the reason. No, her super long speed of improvement may have something to do with those 2 points that you mentioned, but it's definitely not the main reason. The beautiful woman in white frowned and said, "There must be some other secret on her, and this secret is the most important reason for her rapid improvement." But what could it be? How could it create such a miracle? Yao Ningning laughed dryly and didn't answer. Zi Xieching's secret, not to mention that he didn't know now, even in the future, it would be impossible for him to know. Even if such a secret could be shared with someone, that person would definitely be the person who was closest to Zi Xieching and recognized. Yao Ningning wasn't that person in the past and now. As for the future, there was basically no chance for him to become that person. The black lightning in the sky became more and more sparse, and the dark clouds that covered the sky also showed signs of dispersing. The beautiful woman in white let out a long sigh of relief. She tried to move her body and said, "It's okay now." Yao Ningning made a sound of agreement. Regaining her ability to move meant that this heaven's punishment was coming to an end. The two of them were about to leave this place and go to the Falling Flowers cottage to check on Zi Xieching's current situation, but their expressions changed greatly at the same time. His body, which had just taken a step forward, stiffened again and stood still. Their eyes were filled with horror and despair. Because another wave of even more violent heaven's wrath was coming. Although it hadn't formed yet, the pressure that suddenly filled the air was far more than just now, and a new round of heaven's punishment was about to appear. What's going on? How could such a thing happen? The beautiful woman in white's eyes were filled with disbelief. Yao Ningning's face also turned pale instantly. Although the new round of heaven's wrath hadn't formed yet, judging from the current momentum, it was at least 10 times stronger than the previous round of heaven's wrath that Zi Xieching had just gone through. Why would there be such a powerful heaven's punishment? Wasn't this buying a life? If it's such a heaven's punishment, Zi Xieching definitely won't be able to survive it. The beautiful woman in white sighed sincerely. Such a level of heaven's punishment, not to mention Zi Xieching, would she have the confidence to survive it? Ah? Then I'm going to go in and save Miss Zi. Yao Ningning roared loudly, and a frantic look appeared on his face. Don't act rashly. The beautiful woman in white hurriedly stopped him. If you go in rashly, you'll only increase Miss Zi's burden and make her unable to hold on earlier. Then what should we do? Are we just going to watch and do nothing? Yao Ningning was at a loss. Now we can only watch from the sidelines and leave everything up to fate. A strong sense of pity flashed across the beautiful woman in white's eyes. If Zi Xieching really died under this wave of heaven's punishment, and her body and soul were destroyed, that would really be such a pity. Then, the pressure in the air suddenly increased, and it was getting stronger and stronger. The whole sky seemed to be pressing down on them, just like that, pressing down on their heads. The pressure was so great that everyone couldn't bear it, and had to bend their bodies subconsciously. And it even continued to press down. Only when everyone was prostrating on the ground did the heaven's wrath stop increasing. It continued like that. Everyone with life and soul, regardless of whether they were humans, beasts, or birds, all prostrated on the ground in an orderly manner at this moment, not daring to move at all. How could the heaven's wrath be resisted by humans? Such a strong heaven's wrath had completely shocked everyone present. This doesn't seem like a heaven's punishment. For the first time in her life, the beautiful woman in white laid on the ground without any manners. She didn't even think about the problem with her manners, but her heart was filled with an indescribable fear. This seems to be more like the accumulation of countless heaven's punishment together. What's going on? Why is such a situation happening? Yao Ningning rolled his eyes upon hearing that. Such a high-level question. How could a rookie like him who had never experienced such a heaven's punishment know the mystery behind it? The only thing he was thinking about now was just worrying about Zi Xieching's safety. After a while, the heaven and earth started to tremble uneasily. Streaks of black lightning poured down like a storm. Yao Ningning closed his eyes in pain. Zi Xieching, Miss Zi. You're so pitiful. But then, his eyes widened. This lightning didn't seem to be falling towards the Falling Flowers hut where Miss Zi was. it seemed to be falling somewhere else. The aunt and niece looked at each other at the same time, and the surprise in their eyes was obvious. It was unbelievable that two sages actually appeared in this small falling flowers hut within a day. Since when were there so many saint-level powerhouses? Chapter 2190. A heavenly punishment that was many times more terrifying than Xi Xieching's breakthrough. The whole process lasted for a day and a night. In this one day and a night, there were many yellow and white things on the streets of Luohua City. Those were people or beasts who were so frightened that they lost control of their bowels. As for people's homes, they didn't know, but there were probably a lot of them, on the day of the heavenly punishment. Chu Lur and Tan Tan were still waiting quietly by Chu Yang's bed. Although Tan Tan had been informed by the sword spirit that Chu Yang was safe, it didn't seem like he was fine to be in this state. It was hard for him to get rid of his worry. Suddenly, a strong force hit them. Even with their cultivation, they couldn't help but feel dizzy. When they regained their consciousness, they found themselves on the street outside the room. In the next moment, the two of them realized that everyone in the restaurant seemed to have come out. Everyone was standing on the street with a confused look on their faces. Even the shopkeeper, the waiter, and even the chef were all standing there with a confused look on their faces. In the whole restaurant, it seemed that only Chu Yang was still inside. Even Meng Wuya, who had just regained consciousness after being seriously injured, was lying on the street. It was as if there was an irresistible and invisible force that was doing all this. No one could escape. Immediately after, the unprecedentedly crazy and violent lightning fell densely above the inn, and then entered the inn. Everyone was outside, unable to move at all. It wasn't that they didn't want to move, but they really couldn't move. Chu Lur and Tan Tan were burning with worry. They tried their best to resist the heavenly punishment. With Chu Yang's unconscious state, how could he face the heavenly punishment? Wouldn't that be a dead end? But no matter how hard they tried, it was still like ants trying to shake a tree. It was completely useless. In fact, it wasn't just the two of them. Everyone wanted to help, but they didn't have the strength to do so. After a while, everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Damn it, it seemed that this was the first time they had seen such a thing. He was seriously injured and unconscious, lying motionless on the bed like a mummy. How could he still advance? How could he provoke the heavenly punishment? And it was such a terrible heavenly punishment. Wasn't this a little too strange? Wasn't this a little too fantastical? Wasn't this a little too much? At this moment, everyone was worried about one thing: how is this guy going to survive? The heavenly punishment had to be resisted. But the thing that really shocked everyone happened very, very unexpectedly. So many black lightning bolts fell into the room, but it didn't cause any shock at all. Tremble. Not even a little bit. Everything was calm and tranquil from start to finish, like an ancient well without any ripples. It was as if those black lightning bolts that contained a terrifying power had disappeared into thin air the moment they landed on Chu Yang's body. What the hell is going on? What the fuck is going on? Everyone was puzzled after pondering for a long time. Everyone's hearts were collapsing with questions. The heavenly punishment in the sky seemed to have been enraged by a certain someone's response. The might of the heavenly punishment grew fiercer and fiercer, and the lightning bolts became thicker and thicker. Its might became more and more terrifying, as if it wanted to swallow the heavens and swallow the earth. However, no matter how strong or ferocious the heavenly punishment was, the consequences of its descent would only be a silent journey. For an entire day and night, the heavenly punishment continued silently. Everyone was so puzzled that they were about to collapse. No matter how angry the heavenly punishment was, it still had its limits. The next morning, the heavenly punishment finally ended and the sky was clear once again. Everyone who had resumed their activities immediately swarmed into the inn like a swarm of bees and came to the room where Chu Yang was. They saw that Chu Yang's room was not damaged at all even after enduring such a terrifying heavenly punishment. It seemed that there was only a hole in the ceiling, and there was no other trace of damage. No, It wasn't that there was no change at all. The spiritual energy cocoon had changed, and it slowly cracked and disintegrated. After the spiritual energy cocoon split to a certain extent, Chu Yang, who was dressed in black, was revealed. A certain king of hell used his hand to support the cocoon, and the entire cocoon instantly shattered into pieces. After a while, it completely disappeared. Everyone saw that Chu Yang Zhong stretched his waist, sat up, and opened his eyes as if he had just woken up. He saw that so many people were staring at him with their eyes wide open. The person in question, Chu Yang Zhong, seemed to be somewhat baffled. He looked left and right, and sized himself up in astonishment. It seemed that he did not expose anything. He asked in astonishment, "What's going on? Why are you all looking at me like that?" The moment they heard this, everyone suddenly went crazy. "What's going on? What do you think is going on? Such a big thing has happened, and you actually don't seem to know anything? Could it be that you've been daydreaming? How innocent are you speaking? Big brother, my dear brother, don't tell me you don't know what happened." Chulur widened her eyes. "Know what? I've been sleeping and resting all this time. What can I know?" Chu Jiang was still at a loss. Everyone almost fainted. Was he really sleeping? Heavens, earth, let's send another round of heavenly punishment to strike this ignorant fellow. "I'll tell you what happened. You broke through." Chulur paused for a moment before she roared through gritted teeth. "Broke through? I broke through? That can't be right? How can it be so easy to break through?" Chu Yang blinked and looked at Chulur, then at the others. He said softly, "Even if I broke through, there's no need to make such a big fuss, right? This is such a normal thing. Lur, you're a girl. You have to learn to be steady and reserved. What you did just now really ruined your image. How are you going to get married in the future?" Everyone broke down in an instant. What kind of person is this? Heavens are watching what people do. Heavens, this person is already so pretentious. Why don't you open your eyes and strike him a few times? Damn it, do you have to be so demoralizing? Tan Tan roared with grief and indignation. What did you say just now? Chulur looked at Tan Tan with an unfriendly gaze. Are you courting death? My brother warned me for my own good. I didn't even ask you to say anything, and you actually scolded me? Do you believe that I won't tell Big Sister Dan Feng that you've been whoring outside? And let her have a good chat with you? Everyone fainted. Let's see. If Heavens doesn't care, then there's nothing we can do. Anyway, this person will definitely not be able to do anything. But they instantly realized something. Tan Tan scolded. Damn it. But Chu Yang's sister was right in front of him, Chu Lur. This guy was purely looking for trouble. Girl, you're spouting nonsense. When did I go whoring? Tan Tan was furious. This was a big taboo. No matter what, he had to argue. Haha, do you think Big Sister Dan Feng will believe me or you? Big Brother Tan? Chu Lur looked up and laughed. Tan Tan was instantly tongue-tied. Suddenly, his face was full of sweat. Then, it was a waterfall of sweat. Apologize. Chu Lur reprimanded. I was wrong. Tan Tan drooped his head. You're not sincere enough. I was really wrong. I apologize with absolute confidence. I won't dare to do it again. Please open your eyes and be merciful. Tan Tan's face was sullen. Even his lips were trembling. Everyone looked at him sympathetically. What's the saying, evil people will be dealt with by evil people? This is it. Humph, at least you know your place. If you dare to shout at me again, I'll use poison to kill you. Then I'll throw you into a brothel. Then I'll take Big Sister Dan Feng to catch you in the act. Chulur grinned. Her snow-white teeth shone. She seemed to be casually waving her hand. But with just a wave of her hand, Tan Tan's face instantly darkened. Then he couldn't move. With another wave of her hand, Tan Tan immediately regained his ability to move. With Demon King Tan's current strength, he actually couldn't understand how Chu Lur used the poison. How is it? Do you believe me now? Chu Lur asked proudly. I believe. I believe. Tan Tan's hair stood on end. He left dejectedly with his head in his hands. How can I not believe it? It's too scary. This girl is too evil. This demon king can't afford to offend her, but he can hide. Everyone also felt their hair stand on end. They shuddered. Such a sneaky way of using poison was truly impossible to guard against. Even as a saint-level expert, Meng Wuya sighed with emotion. The last time he had seen Chulu's poison hadn't had any immediate effect on an expert of Heavenly Man realm or above. But now, Tan Tan, who was at the peak of Heavenly Man realm, could be subdued without him realizing it. In fact, she could even handle it with ease, and still had strength to spare. It could be seen that Chulu's progress during this period of time was extremely fast. In the room, after a very detailed interrogation, everyone finally confirmed one thing: Chu Yang really didn't know anything about his advancement. This guy was really sleeping peacefully. He didn't know anything from the beginning to the end. After confirming this matter, everyone hung their heads in dejection and listlessness. Motherfucker, when was it not earth-shattering, life-threatening, and life-threatening? Which heavenly punishment didn't have countless near-death experiences before barely surviving? But when it came to him, well, he passed it while unconscious. Was there still justice in this? Everyone's faces were filled with sighs and indignation. People really couldn't be compared to each other. Chu Yang really didn't know anything, because the tribulation space had finally opened again. And now, the tribulation space was even more powerful than before. It couldn't even be mentioned in the same breath as before. When the heavenly punishment fell, it was directly absorbed by the tribulation space. So throughout the whole process, Chu Yang didn't feel any tremors at all. He was really just sleeping. But after the heavenly punishment this time, all the injuries on Chu Yang's body had really disappeared. He had completely recovered his health. Of course, Chu Yang's ignorance this time also caused some delays. If he was awake, he would naturally be able to sense that the person breaking through on the other side was Zi Xieching. And Zi Xieching would also sense him. But he was completely unconscious. Seeing that everyone had left, Chu Yang couldn't hold it in any longer. He closed the door and entered the tribulation space with a thought. Chapter 2191. As soon as Chu Yang entered, he was shocked by what he saw. The entire tribulation space seemed to have changed. 7-colored spirit chi floated everywhere in the space. It was as if the spirit chi was real and could be touched with one's hand. The large warehouse that was originally filled with precious materials and metals had now become palace-like things. Inside, purple crystal jade essence, soul of purple crystal, meteoric iron, star metal and so on were neatly arranged. The original medicinal field had now become a huge medicinal field that covered an area of more than 10 acres. The spirit herbs were all glowing, their green branches swaying in the wind, emitting a thick medicinal fragrance that made people feel relaxed and happy just by smelling it. In the medicinal field, there were 3 little people bustling about. Looking at the thriving medicinal field, the 3 little fellows beamed with joy. The 3 little guys were naturally the 3 elixir spirits. The entire tribulation space no longer had the feeling of being able to see the edges like in the past. Now, it was truly boundless. A little further away, there were several courtyards that were tens of thousands of feet high. The people inside couldn't come out at all. It was a special area that the sword spirit had divided for those who practiced martial arts inside. Chu Yang could feel that the speed of cultivation in the tribulation space was at least 20 times faster than outside. This was the most conservative estimate. Although the tribulation space's appearance had changed a lot, Chu Yang knew that it was really different from the past. After fusing with a small world of the same type, the tribulation space gradually gave rise to a situation where it formed its own universe. In many places, the embryonic form of mountains and rivers had gradually appeared. Chu Yang moved his feet and came to the herb field. The sword spirit immediately appeared in front of him. "Congratulations on your recovery, Lord Sword Master!" Congratulations to Lord Swordmaster for becoming a saint. Chu Yang laughed and scolded. Why are you still so polite to me? Are you worried because you haven't found the inheritance of your Phoenix clan? Are you asking me to think of a way? The Sword Spirit smiled bitterly. Chu Yang pondered and said, Sword Spirit, there's a story. I don't know if you've heard of it. What story? What is it about? The Sword Spirit asked. Once upon a time, there was a chick. I don't know what happened, but when it was still in its eggshell, it was accidentally brought back by a phoenix. It grew up in the phoenix's nest. Chu Yang smiled. This little chick has been watching its mother phoenix fly around since it was born, and it was extremely envious. It also wants to fly, but how can a chicken fly? Chu Yang's story was somewhat absurd. But the Sword Spirit still listened to it with a solemn expression on his face. He even thought about it seriously. Finally, Chick and Little Phoenix grew up together and began to learn how to fly. The little phoenixes flew very quickly and smoothly, but Chick still couldn't fly. This result made him very anxious. Looking at his old friends flying in the sky one by one with bright and beautiful feathers, Little Chick knew in his heart that he was probably not a member of this group at all, because there was a fundamental difference in appearance. He also understood that the reason he couldn't fly was because of his talent. It was because he didn't have that kind of long wings. But he really wanted to fly. The idea of wanting to fly was deeply ingrained and indelible. Although he knew that he wasn't made of this material, but after a painful choice, Chick finally decided that he had to learn to fly no matter what. So, he jumped down from the trees and cliffs again and again to try to fly. Every time he fell, he was covered with bruises and almost died. But he persisted over and over again, and never gave up. Some little phoenixes couldn't bear to watch, so they told him, You're not made of this material. Stop practicing, you'll kill yourself. It's not worth it. Even if you can't fly, you'll still have a lifetime to live. If you really want to fly, I'll take you to fly once a day. I'll take you to fly, and you'll also fly, right? Speaking till here, Chu Yang looked at the Sword Spirit and said with a smile, If you were this chick, what would you choose? The Sword Spirit said hesitantly, As we all know, chickens can't fly. Even if they can flutter a few times and glide for a certain distance, they can't really fight in the sky. Since that little phoenix has promised to take him to fly in the sky every day, this result is already not bad. 8 out of 10 things don't go your way in life, not to mention that you've already fulfilled more than half of your wish. Chu Yang sighed and continued. But that chick firmly refused. He said, You carried me and flew to the sky. That's because you flew up. Although I also went up, I didn't rely on my own ability to fly up. Once you're gone, I'll still fall down. I want to fly by myself. I must fly by myself. I don't want to fall. I don't want to have the chance to fall. The little phoenixes expressed their heartfelt incomprehension. Because of his persistence, they began to laugh at him. They said that he was just a chick, but he actually wanted to fly and fight in the sky. Isn't this nonsense? But in the face of such cynicism, the chick never gave up. He still climbed up the cliff every day before dawn, jumped down, then climbed up again, and jumped down again. During this period of falling, he practiced his ability to fly again and again. He practiced like this over and over again, until he was covered with bruises and couldn't move anymore. Only then would he go to rest and recover. Speaking till here, Chu Yang's voice stopped abruptly. However, at this moment, the Sword Spirit was already fascinated by the story. He said, Then, what happened after that? I'm actually not sure about what happened after that. Chu Yang smiled faintly. But I'm willing to believe that this chick will eventually learn to fly. He definitely will. Even though he can't be compared to a phoenix, he will definitely fly further than an ordinary chick. Speaking till here, Chu Yang looked at the Sword Spirit with a smile. The Sword Spirit lowered his head thoughtfully. Actually, people are the same. Chu Yang smiled. Some people with high talent can improve very quickly, while some people with low talent can improve relatively slowly. However, as long as the person who improves very slowly can be like this chick, Then one day, he will also be able to reach the top and look down on the world. The so-called rich and powerful, the so-called experts, are actually just ordinary people in the beginning. But after they work hard, they become rich and powerful people, or even immortals in the eyes of ordinary people, who are too high to reach. However, they often neglect their beginning. Everyone only sees immortals and rich people, but very few people compare themselves with them. So, the rich and powerful people become more and more legends. The chick is not a phoenix. He doesn't have the talent to fly, but he still wants to fly. He tries his best to try the possibility of flying. Humans, immortals, rich and powerful people, in essence, are all humans. But very few people have ever thought of being like them. Especially when an ordinary person sees the first emperor, his first thought is only to prostrate himself in worship. But very few people have ever thought that these so-called first emperors, first emperor, peerless masters, were actually like us for a period of time. If there is the inheritance of the Phoenix clan, then there is it. If there is no inheritance, then there is no inheritance. Chu Yang turned around and looked at the sword spirit seriously. Even if there is the so-called inheritance, as long as you don't stop moving forward, then one day, you will still reach the end again. If you are faced with a situation where there is no way forward again, what will you do? I believe that for you, it is only a matter of time, because you are also a person who can only move forward and not back down. If there's no such thing as an ancient inheritance anymore, won't you try to find your own path in the future? On the road forward, the most important thing is always yourself, and not external forces. Chu Jiang said slowly. The sword spirit suddenly sweated profusely. Yes, if the inheritance of the clan really ends here, and the predecessors stopped here, will I stop moving forward from now on? Will I always be content with the status quo? No, this is not the result I want, absolutely not. That little chick, maybe one day, he will learn how to fly. Of course, it is also possible that he will accidentally fall to his death while learning like this, or he will naturally die of old age at the end of his life and still not learn how to fly. But I absolutely believe that no matter if he falls to his death or dies of old age, when he dies, he will not regret it. Chu Jiang smiled gently and said, because he has worked hard for himself. Where the heart is, there will be no regrets. No matter whether he succeeds or fails, he has tried and struggled with all his might. He has fought with all his might, no matter whether he is facing the mandate of heaven or a strong enemy. Chu Yang laughed and said, I'm such a little chick. I hope that you can be like that too. Sword Spirit, don't you want to become the creator god of the Phoenix clan and create a new legend? Chu Yang said softly. You will create an everlasting path by yourself so that your descendants will regard you as a god? No path doesn't mean that it is impossible to walk. It's just that the predecessors have not walked, or have not finished walking. In a desert, you can walk to the other side in any direction. As long as you don't lose your way, the footprints you leave behind are a path. Create a path that belongs to you. A little chick is not a phoenix, but you are. A little chick has no talent, but you do. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? After Chu Yang finished speaking, he did not speak anymore. But the sword spirit's eyes gradually lit up. Yes, no path does not mean that it is impossible to walk. As long as I walk, there will be a path. If I don't take the first step, there will never be a path. He thought for a while, and then suddenly bowed to Chu Yang. Thank you, Sword Lord, for pointing out the right path. If I can find a new path one day, it will all be thanks to Sword Lord's words today. As he said, he laughed and said, From today onwards I am a little chick. A little chick, who wants to fly. Heaven's Third Chapter, Supplement Chapter 1. I want to say that I am also like this, a little chick who wants to fly. Very tired, let's make up a chapter today. Heaven is the birthday of our brothers, Universe Ghost and Yun Tianxiang. Let us wish them a happy birthday. Every year, there will be a day like this, peace and happiness. When I got home yesterday, I told my wife that I had won 13,000 yuan. I told my wife that I had won 8,000 yuan. Then I handed over all 8,000 yuan to her. My wife was overjoyed. She felt that I was honest, so she generously rewarded me with 2,000 yuan of her private stash. Suddenly, my wallet was full. Chapter 2192. Chu Yang finally let go of the burden in his heart and laughed. By the way, how many heavy pills do we have now? Do we have any left? Chu Yang asked. As he spoke, he looked at the side of the medicinal field in front. Near the spring of life, there was a small pile of elixir-like things. He couldn't help but ask, "What is that?" As he spoke, he walked over. "Don't touch this first." The sword spirit jumped in fright when he saw this, and hastily jumped over to stop him. "These are the essences of hundreds of herbs collected by the 3 medicine spirits. They couldn't absorb them all, so they condensed into these things. Don't underestimate these things. These are the purest good things. Wait for me to process them a little, and add the ingredients of the great herbs. Then, each one of them will be a genuine heavy pill, and the quality will be absolutely excellent." Chu Yang's eyes immediately lit up. Looking at the pile of thousands of pills, he said greedily, "That is to say, these are actually thousands of heavy pills? I'm going to faint." Minister Chu had been really short on money during this period of time. It was really hard to live without heavy pills. Until now, there were still many people outside who had not recovered from their serious injuries. This made Chu Yang feel very uncomfortable. Now that he heard that he would have thousands of heavy pills in the future, he fainted from happiness. He urged the sword spirit, "Then why don't you hurry up and process them? These things should be the first priority now. Everything else can be put aside." "Of course." The sword spirit was very proud. "I've already started to process these few days. When I'm done with this batch, I'll go into seclusion and open up my new path with all my strength. I also want to become a person who creates history, an immortal legend." "Good." Chu Yang patted the sword spirit's shoulder. "I'll wait for your good news." The sword spirit left, full of self-satisfaction. Chu Yang was planning to check on the current situation of Tai Batian and the others when he suddenly realized that there was a place in front of him that was emitting white and black lights at the same time. They were flashing and reflecting each other. Although there were only 2 colors, black and white, it was not monotonous at all. Chu Yang had never seen such a thing. He walked over full of curiosity. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked in that direction, the 3 medicine spirits who were busy in the medicinal field stood up at the same time and followed behind Chu Yang. Their 3 small faces were filled with an indescribable longing. Chu Yang was very curious about what could make these 3 little guys so excited. But these 3 little guys couldn't speak even though they had transformed into human forms. So, Chu Yang had no way of knowing the whole story. He could only feel that they were really excited. When he got closer to take a look, he saw that there was a strange seal on it. It was the white and black light that was emitting from it. Vaguely, an enormous amount of energy was about to burst out. "What is this? Why does it feel so familiar?" Chu Yang thought for a long time. Then, he suddenly remembered. "Isn't this the reason why I took out that strange fruit? Was it the heaven and earth arcane yellow fruit? Could it be that the seal had loosened? I can open it now." He reached out and touched it. He found that the seal was still unbreakable. But Chu Yang had already sensed that there seemed to be a little gap in the seal. With his current strength, he should be able to break it in one fell swoop if he went all out. Thinking of the countless magical fruits inside, Chu Yang salivated. But thinking about it again, this was definitely not the time to enjoy them. Since he had already confirmed that he could break the seal, he could come and take them at any time. He was not in a hurry. So, he planned to turn around and leave. It didn't matter if he left, but the 3 medicine spirits were anxious. Their small hands hugged his leg at the same time. They raised their heads. Their faces were full of longing. Chu Yang looked down and couldn't help but smile helplessly. "Little guys, I also want to take out the things inside. But those things are very magical. Once I take them out, the spiritual energy inside will start to dissipate. I can't stop it at all. I have to think of a way. If I take them out now and the spiritual energy dissipates for no reason, it will be a pity. Don't you think so? The three little guys stared at him. They seemed to understand his words. Finally, they slowly let go of their hands. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. I can finally get away. I can't beat these three little guys, nor can I scold them. In fact, I don't even dare to show an unhappy expression. Fortunately, these three little guys are very reasonable. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to get away today. The sealed tribulation space reopened. And Chu Yang was the most worried in this space. Naturally, Wu Qian and Tai Butian were the two girls. Wu Qian and Tai Butian were now in a separate courtyard. But they still couldn't go out. Although they didn't lack food and other things, the two girls couldn't feel at ease if they didn't see Chu Yang come in. Especially after that terrifying spiritual energy storm, the two girls' cultivations had greatly improved. They felt that they would no longer be a burden to Chu Yang. So, they couldn't help but anxiously look forward to him. So much time has passed. So, why hasn't Chu Yang come in yet? Did something happen in this room again? The two were so worried that they couldn't sleep. Although the sword spirit came in a few days ago and said that Chu Yang was completely fine, the two were still worried. As long as they didn't see Chu Yang safe with their own eyes, no one's words would count. The sword spirit was no exception. Even though they knew that the sword spirit was trustworthy and believed that the sword spirit wouldn't lie to them, they still couldn't help but worry. Didn't you say that Chu Yang is fine? Why hasn't he come in yet? What is he doing outside? Wu Qian looked a little impatient. Yes, logically speaking, it doesn't make sense. Tai Butian frowned. Could it be that he is being hunted down too hard? Or... It can't be like that. If he was really being hunted down too hard, he would have come in long ago to avoid trouble. Wu Qian still didn't know that the space of tribulations had been sealed. Even Chu Yang couldn't enter. She wrinkled her nose and snorted. I think this guy might have met some little beauty again and left us behind. Well, maybe he met Mo Qing Wu. Tai Butian nodded. That makes sense too. Looking at the time, Mo Qing Wu should have already grown up by now. Can? Wu Qian's eyes widened. Suddenly, she burst into laughter. Can what? My Majesty? Hearing this, Tai Butian's face turned red. She knew that she had said something wrong, but she still said angrily. Girl, why are your thoughts so unhealthy? What nonsense are you thinking every day? Have you been led astray by someone? Wu Qian laughed. I don't know who started thinking nonsense first. If we're talking about being led astray, it's you who was led astray first. Tai Butian was even more embarrassed. She pounced forward and grabbed Wu Qian. Instantly, the two girls laughed together. While they were fooling around, Tai Butian suddenly felt something strange. It was as if there was a big warm hand suddenly placed on her perky buttocks. This big hand was extremely naughty. After touching it for a while, it actually didn't seem to be satisfied. It rubbed it again, and then rubbed it even more. Then, it didn't stop. Then, a voice laughed lasciviously. Two beauties, what are you playing so happily about? I wonder if I can join in? You don't mind if I join in, right? When the two girls heard this voice, they couldn't help but stiffen at the same time. Then, they reacted and shouted, Chu Yang! Suddenly, they jumped up and hugged him tightly, completely disregarding their image and manners. For a moment, they actually cried tears of joy. Sure enough, he was fine. He was really fine. It seemed that even Chu Yang was shocked by the two girls' overreaction. His lust was almost extinguished. The two of them hugged him tightly, and talked endlessly. Chu Yang's heart was filled with a warm feeling that he hadn't felt for a long time. In this world, only his family would be so worried about him. After a long time, the two girls' emotions gradually stabilized. How's the outside environment now? Is it better? Tai Butian straightened up from Chu Yang's arms and asked with a red face. It's more than better. It's basically stable. I believe it should be fine in a short time. Chu Yang smiled. And Mo Yuntian's army has completely retreated. If they want to make a comeback, they will need at least a month's time. That's great! Wu Qianqian clapped and cheered. You asked me? How are you? What level have you broken through? Chu Yang asked. Tai Butian revealed a look of lingering fear as she said. The rate of breakthroughs in cultivation this time was really too fast. The spiritual qi given by this atmosphere was really too ferocious. During that period of cultivation, I felt that my body was in danger of exploding at every moment. I could only do my best to cultivate and digest the spiritual qi. That kind of subtle feeling of breaking through several times in a day is really unforgettable. It was the first time in Tai Butian's life that she had absorbed so much spiritual energy in a day, and then broke through. She was really not used to that kind of surprise. I'm the same. Wu Qianqian smiled. I'm actually 8 levels higher than before. I don't know what level I'm at now. Anyway, it shouldn't be too bad. Tai Butian said with some uncertainty. I only know that I'm definitely stronger than before by many times. As for how many times I've improved, I completely don't remember. At that time, I was in danger of exploding at any time. How could I care about the number of breakthroughs? It was rare for Chu Yang to see such a confused look on Tai Butian's face. The more he looked at her, the cuter he felt. He couldn't help but laugh. From this, it could be seen that Tai Butian and Wu Qianqian were fundamentally different. Wu Qianqian was the one who carried out the details. She saw every step clearly and grasped it meticulously. On the other hand, Tai Butian was in charge of the overall situation. She didn't pay much attention to the details. As a dignified emperor, if she cared about everything and understood everything clearly, she might have died of exhaustion long ago. All in all, everyone has improved by a lot. In this world of the heavenly imperial court, we can be considered to have some power to protect ourselves. Chu Yang smiled with relief. Later, I'll bring all of you out and see the light of day again. Sorry for the late update. There will be another update later. Chapter 2193. Why don't you go out now? Is there anything else? Tai Butian frowned and asked. Chu Yang was speechless for a moment, but he was too embarrassed to reveal his true intentions. He said angrily, How dare you question my most correct decision? You deserve a beating. He dragged her over unreasonably, pressed her on his knee, and slapped her buttocks heavily. Immediately, her soft buttocks rippled. Chu Yang was enraged. He couldn't help but put his hand on it and gently rubbed it. Tai Butian was embarrassed and angry. An inexplicable feeling rose in her body. She instantly understood. She said in a trembling voice, Put me down. Chu Yang smiled evilly and said, A bold woman like you who dares to question your husband must be severely punished. See how I'll treat you with a big stick. Let's see if you'll beg for mercy or not. Let's see if you'll surrender under the might of my stick. Wu Qianqian saw the situation. How could she not know what Chu Yang was planning? She only felt her face burning. She turned around and fled. At this time, she was not in the mood to care about sisterhood. She didn't expect to be caught by Chu Yang. Just as she was about to struggle, her fragrant lips were suddenly blocked. A soft tongue went in, and in an instant, she felt weak all over. On the other side, Tai Butian's breasts were already half exposed. In such a short period of time, her clothes had already been taken off by Chu Yang. It could be seen just how thirsty Minister Chu was right now. Indeed, he had been really stifled all this way. The whole room was full of spring. For a long, long time, a certain king of hell lay on the bed in satisfaction. Beside him were 2 beautiful women who couldn't move at all. They looked at him shyly and helplessly. After a long while, Chu Yang went to see the others. Brother whose current strength had completely recovered during this period of upgrade in the tribulation space. He was even stronger than before. As for the others, Wan Dao, Lightning Snake, and the others, they had also advanced by 2 or 3 levels. Especially Wang Dao, there was still a large amount of hidden spiritual yuan in his body. Perhaps it was because Chu Yang had advanced too quickly, which had indirectly caused his potential to soar. In the future, he could expect great success. As for Lightning Blade and the others, their cultivations were originally much higher than Tai Batian and the others. Therefore, the increase in their cultivation levels this time was relatively smaller. As for Huyen Aobo and the others, their foundations were slightly weaker, and they were about the same as Tai Batian and Xie Danqiu. After this time, they had all advanced by 7 levels. Now, the weakest was Xie Danqiu's wife, Madame Mei, who had already reached the peak of the heaven stage. The other women had all advanced to the saint stage. Chu Yang was overjoyed. This time, it was equivalent to adding a lot of experts out of thin air. The security had also been greatly increased. At the very least, they didn't have to send out many experts to protect them all the time. However, there was another problem that needed to be faced, or rather, worried about: how to release these people. If Bai Yuqin, Meng Wuye, and the others found out that Wu Xing had suddenly appeared, they would be surprised. However, if they suspected that he had a small world on him, it would be tantamount to exposing all his trump cards. Bai Yuqin and the others were fine. After all, they had already become his hardcore supporters. But what about the demons? What about the people in the inn? What about the Dream Slayer army? If any of these people were to leak a word or half a sentence, his biggest secret would be exposed. If Mo Yuntian's people knew about this trump card, the consequences would obviously be extremely unimaginable. Chu Yang frowned and thought hard. After thinking about it for a long time, he still decided not to expose them. He would wait for a suitable opportunity to let them out to meet people. If he hid this new force, it would be like adding another unknown trump card. Only until he walked out of the tribulation space, Chu Yang was still thinking about this matter. What kind of method should he use to release all of them without arousing any suspicion? There were too many directions to consider in such a method. Whether it was time or place, he had to consider properly. Not only did he have to consider the thoughts of the people outside, he also had to consider the thoughts of the people inside the tribulation space. Now, other than Tai Batian and Wu Qianqian, the others inside the tribulation space didn't know where they were. Of course, they would have some suspicions, but this wasn't a big deal. But once they combined the inside and outside together with a relatively rational inference, they were actually in Chu Yang's tribulation space during this period of time? That would be really bad. Everything would be exposed. A certain king of hell was at his wits' end. He frowned and walked out of the room. When he came to the hall, he found a certain supreme demon Ning Ning sitting there listlessly with a sad face. It was as if her whole body had been sucked out of her. She didn't even have the slightest bit of vitality. The other fool, Tan Tan, was on the side, laughing gloatingly. The two saints Hu and Ma glared at Tan Tan. Obviously, their anger had already brewed to a considerable degree. In a few days they would probably put a gunny sack on someone behind Yao Ning Ning's back and give him a good beating. Otherwise, how could they vent their anger? Chasing a woman is actually so difficult. Ah! You've really disgraced me, the great demon King Tan. You mustn't recognize me when you go out in the future. I can't afford to lose that face. Tan Tan laughed arrogantly. It was as if he was really a great expert. Yao Ning Ning wanted to say something, but hesitated. Then, she said with a sad face, "Brother Tan, what do you think I can do? He's just ignoring me. Moreover, he's much better at fighting than I am now. In addition, there's also... An explanation is a cover-up. A cover-up is the truth. In the final analysis, isn't it just one sentence, you're a good-for-nothing? You still have to find so many excuses. All of them are cover-ups and excuses." Tan Tan raised his head and flicked his hair. Take me and my senior martial brother for example. We two senior martial brothers have always been successful in this aspect. Oh, I understand now. It must be because you're too ugly. You don't have any skills to show. So, wouldn't people look down on you? Yao Ning Ning clearly didn't even have the mood to quarrel. She sighed. My heart is now like the 1,000-year snow of the snowy plains. My feelings are like ice. What's that ice again? She had suddenly forgotten her words halfway through her sentence. As expected, her idiocy had reached a considerable level. She could do what others couldn't. Bai Shixian, who was reading a book and pretending to be calm, finally couldn't help but chuckle. She laughed so hard that she was trembling. She was rejoicing in other people's misfortune. Yao Ningning was feeling sad at this moment. She suddenly saw Bai Shixuan's graceful and elegant figure. She was as beautiful as a painting. She couldn't help but stare at her. She muttered, "A graceful and virtuous woman. Her smile can topple a city. Her smile can topple a country. It's hard to describe." Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma's faces darkened when they heard this. "You're really disappointing. No wonder people mock you so much. You were so desperate for a woman just now. Now you're facing another woman. You're revealing your perverted nature in the blink of an eye. You say, do you still have any moral integrity? You can't." Tan Tan was wholeheartedly rejoicing in other people's misfortune at this moment. He was laughing so hard that his mouth had stretched all the way to his cheeks. His belly was bulging as he laughed heartily. Suddenly, he saw Chu Yang coming down. So, he had a bright idea. He said, "Why don't you let me and my senior martial brother help you? It's said that my senior martial brother is a weirdo. No matter what kind of woman is difficult to deal with, all of them become soft in front of him. His attainments are second to none in the world of picking up girls. He's at the point of perfection. He's at the peak of perfection. He does as he pleases. He's always successful. As long as my senior martial brother goes, he'll immediately take down any kind of woman. My senior martial brother has a way to pick up girls from the age of 80 to the age of 8. Chu Yang, who had just come down, heard this. His face darkened. "How can you talk like that? Moreover, I've only seen a few women in total. You're saying that I'm like a saint who destroys flowers. You're slandering me. You're making up rumors." Yao Ningning's eyes lit up when he heard this. But he said with some hesitation, "This matter of picking up girls, can you still let others help you? Isn't this not very good?" Tan Tan scolded him in disappointment. "You're really a pig." "No, saying that you're a pig is simply mocking other people's pigs. Don't tell me that you don't know the principle of a hero needs 3 helpers? You're wasting my saliva on such a small principle. This sentence is also reasonable." Yao Ningning immediately made up his mind. "All right. In fact, I've already given up. It's just that I don't know who killed me. I'm really a bit wronged. You can't force a melon to be sweet. As long as Big Brother Chu can help me find out who her sweetheart is, I'll be satisfied. I won't ask for more." Tan Tan raised his eyebrows. "Just find out? Isn't this request too high? You're not planning to get rid of that pretty boy, right? And then, how can I be that kind of person?" Yao Ningning cried out as if he had been wronged. "I just want to tell that person that he must treat her well. She's a good girl. I can't take care of her for a lifetime, but I also hope that she can be happy. How can I do such a despicable thing? What kind of person do you think I am?" Tan Tan looked at him with some suspicion. "I really didn't expect that you're actually a love saint. You're really worthy of being my brother." Yao Ningning's face turned red. "I won't allow you to blaspheme my love experience." Tan Tan smiled strangely. "Well, we will fulfill your wish. Your big brother Chu will personally go into action and show his skills as long as you can serve him comfortably. Then this matter will be as easy as turning over one's hand. In fact, it will be as easy as turning over one's hand." Yao Ningning turned his head to look at Chu Yang and pleaded, "Big brother Chu, you." Chu Yang sighed deeply and shook his head. "I can't help you with this matter. I don't have that ability." He hadn't even finished speaking when Tan Tan and Yao Ningning hugged each other's arms and escorted him out of the door. "That won't do. You have to go even if you don't want to. In any case, I'm counting on you. Boss, bring out your ability to pick up girls." The two of them spoke in unison. "I'm going out to eat. I'll write when I get back." There should be more updates, right? Chapter 2194. I'm serious. Even if I go, it might not be useful. Chu Yang helplessly walked out while smiling bitterly. It will definitely be useful if you go. We believe in your methods, the two said in unison. I didn't know that I had such methods. If she really ignores me at that time, how embarrassing would that be? Chu Yang made a final effort. Absolutely not. I have full confidence in you, senior martial brother. Tan Tan was in high spirits. He said as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Ning, do you want to make a bet with me? Yao Ningning was confused. Bet? What bet? I bet that Chu Yang will definitely be received when he gets there. Do you believe it? Moreover, he will be treated as a distinguished guest. Do you believe it? It's not impossible for that girl to throw herself into his arms. My senior martial brother's charm is really unstoppable. Tan Tan raised his head and talked nonsense. The more he talked, the more he talked. What? I absolutely don't believe it. Yao Ningning shook his head like a rattledrum. Brother Tan, you don't know. That girl has always been cold. She doesn't even treat acquaintances well, let alone a stranger whom she has just met. Even if she can receive him, it's absolutely impossible for her to throw herself into his arms. You don't believe it? Then let's make a bet. Tan Tan laughed. Tan Tan had always been full of confidence in Chu Yang. It had already reached the point of blindness. This feeling that had been cultivated since childhood made Tan Tan think that even the heavenly imperial court's Emperor 1, Empress 1, and only sage monarch were all trash compared to Chu Yang. Let's make a bet. Yao Ningning shouted unconvinced. If it's really like this, I'll accept any bet. Tan Tan rolled his eyes and said, There's no need to make a big bet. The loser must gather all of us after he comes back. Then, he must make a self-reflection in front of everyone. And the content of the reflection will be, I'm a pig. I'm a stupid pig. I won't be called Zhao Ningning in the future. I'll change my name to Zhu Ningning. As long as the content is not less than 100 words, I'll pass. Yao Ningning was very dissatisfied. Brother Tan, I haven't lost this bet yet. You'll definitely lose this time. So, you won't be called Tan Tan in the future, but Shu Tan. Tan Tan laughed and raised his head. I'll lose? How could I lose? With my senior brother's unparalleled ability to pick up girls, how could I lose? TSK. Your idea is the biggest joke in the world, the great Tang of the world. Yao Ningning was also full of confidence. Nothing is absolute in this world. Let me tell you, you're definitely going to lose this time. The two idiots chattered nonstop all the way. Chu Yang's arms were tightly held by the two as they walked forward. They had already walked out of the hotel and out of the main street. They were slowly walking towards a desolate place. As far as the eye could see, it was a small path. At this moment, the path was already covered with a layer of withered flowers. Along the way, the fragrance was pleasant. Ahead of them was a crossroad, with flower paths on both sides. The dark green ponds were like large mirrors, calm and without ripples. It was peaceful all around. Even Chu Yang felt that his body and mind were at peace as he walked here. He felt an indescribable sense of enjoyment. Even his breathing had involuntarily slowed down by quite a bit. He was completely at ease. This place is really beautiful. Tan Tan shook his head. It makes me feel embarrassed even when I want to fart. I can only clamp my buttocks and let it come out slowly. This sentence was absolutely unexpected. There was no doubt that it was too much of a killjoy. Chu Yang and Yao Ningning felt at the same time that the beautiful scene in their hearts had been tarnished by someone in an instant. They couldn't help but glare at Tan Tan angrily. Tan Tan was still complacent in the face of their sharp gazes. Don't look at me with such admiring eyes. I will become arrogant and complacent. The two retched. They were really powerless against such a narcissistic person. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from the crossroad ahead. It seemed that there was a large group of people running forward. The three frowned at the same time. Could it be that there are still people running to exercise at this time? The answer soon appeared. They saw a large group of people carrying wooden frames whizzing past. Everyone was strong and looked valiant. Chu Yang and Tan Tan looked at each other in dismay at this sudden scene. They didn't know what was going on at all. Only Yao Ningning let out a long sigh. That idiot is actually here again. He really has perseverance. Who? Chu Yang asked. The level of idiocy of a guy who could be called an idiot by a certain royal highness could be imagined. Even Chu Yang couldn't help but want to see for himself. Yao Ningning grinned. A person who is even more idiotic than me. It is precisely from him that I found my monstrous confidence. The two still wanted to ask more. Suddenly, the fragrance of flowers assailed their nostrils. They saw hundreds of people, carrying large bouquets of roses whizzing over. Then, they whizzed past in front of everyone's eyes again. Only a wisp of fragrance was left. It actually didn't disperse for a long time. So many flowers. Even Chu Yang felt a little shocked. The last and most intense aria made Chu Yang wait. They shuddered at the same time. Yao Ningning's lips were green and his face was white. He let out a long sigh. This is also called a poem. The poets of the past dynasties would probably all jump off a building together. Just as the three of them were staring at each other, they saw a person walking over. His figure was as tall as a bamboo pole. He was wearing a large cloak that dragged on the ground. As he walked, there was a rustling sound. That was the sound of the cloak sweeping the ground. Everywhere he passed, the ground was actually clean, revealing a clean road. The petals on the ground were all dragged away by the cloak. After a while, when there were enough petals, they fell off from the cloak. So, there was a pile of fallen petals on the ground. Then, he continued to walk and sweep, and another pile. Seeing this scene, Chu Yang and Tan Tan couldn't help but gasp in amazement. Not to mention other things, just looking at this kind of detached movement of the cloak dragging on the ground, he was full of the elegance of a cleaner. While they were talking, that person had already arrived in front of them. His arrogant eyes looked at the three of them. Then, he raised his nose and said, "Yo, you're here again? Let me tell you, you definitely have no chance. Go back, go back. Go back to where you came from. Why bother wasting time?" But he was talking to Yao Ningning. It was as if he was earnestly advising Yao Ningning. Hearing this, Yao Ningning said with interest, "I have no chance, but do you have a chance? You've also worked hard for so long. How many times have you seen him? Have you really seen him?" Hearing this, the person on the other side was furious. "What are you talking about?" But then, he sighed dejectedly. "I can't not have a chance. If I really don't have a chance, my life will be over." This person was of course the third young master of the Tang clan, Duke Tang Yangwei. Don't think about it. This is the great Duke Wei. Cough cough, I'm being threatened by someone. Chu Yang and Tan Tan couldn't help but be surprised. So, Yao Ningning explained through sound transmission. When the two of them heard that this guy was actually infatuated with that woman the moment he saw her, and actually caused himself to be impotent, this kind of thing, naturally, they were even more shocked. Although they still maintained a calm expression on their faces, they were already laughing to death in their hearts. And then, when they thought of his words, "I can have no chance. If I really have no chance, my generation is finished," they were even more overjoyed. This guy was also quite helpless. Men, if they really couldn't do it, wouldn't they really be finished? Chu Yang tried his best to hold back his laughter. His expression returned to indifference. He said earnestly, "Yes, if you can't achieve your goal, your thoughts naturally can't be clear. It's inevitable that some inner demons will be born. And these inner demons are called psychological problems by ordinary people. Whether it's for ordinary people or for martial artists like us, it's a very serious problem." These words had undoubtedly saved the face of this Tang clan's third young master. Moreover, they were reasonable and well thought out. The Tang clan's third young master suddenly had a feeling of understanding friend in the world. he almost burst into tears. He took a few steps forward and grabbed Chu Yang's hand. He shook it vigorously and said with tears in his eyes, "Brother, your words have really touched my heart. I think that I, the Tang clan's third young master, can be considered a hero of a region. With a wave of my hand, the wind and clouds would change. My martial arts are excellent, and I can move the clouds and rain with a flip of my hand. If such an inner demon is planted in my heart, I won't be able to move freely in the Jianghu with my beautiful wife and concubines in the future. How regretful would that be?" Chu Yang nodded seriously. Yes, this is indeed a big problem. This inner demon is related to your future prospects, and it's related to your future life. You must not treat it lightly. You must think of a way to solve it." The Tang clan's third young master heard this and nodded repeatedly. He felt that the words of this young man had really touched the bottom of his heart. He had lived for half a lifetime, but he had never met a person who understood him so well. It was indeed rare to find a confidant in life. They instantly became close friends. "If this inner demon is born in your martial arts cultivation because of this matter, I admit that I am powerless. As for other matters, I may have some ways, but, sigh, I don't want to talk about it." Chu Yang's expression changed from indifferent to amiable. There was even a kind of reverence in his expression as he said, "For a hero of a region like your Excellency, a peerless expert, most of the problems you encounter are related to martial arts. This little brother can only wish your Excellency that you can achieve your wish as soon as possible. But this is awkward." The Tang clan's third young master's eyes lit up as he heard these words. He knew his own matters. He had been concentrating on women these past few years. How could he be in the mood to care about martial arts? Just now, he had been frightened by that person's cold gaze. These days, every time he wanted to do something, he would always unconsciously feel a cold gaze staring at his eyes. It was like this every time. And every time he thought of this, he would be unable to endure it. But now, he heard this guy in front of him say that he actually had a way? Moreover, he seemed to be very confident. Tang Yongwei looked at his crotch. His eyes turned, and an idea came to his mind. Chapter 2195. Tang clan's third young master rolled his eyes. He heaved a long sigh and said, "Brother, even though we've only known each other for a short while, I feel that we're kindred spirits. So, I won't hide some things from you. Brother, you may be young, so you don't know that martial arts isn't the only thing in this world. Other things are also very important. They're related to life and death. So, they can't be neglected." Chu Yang looked surprised. "Oh? Other things? What are they?" Tang clan's third young master coughed and said, "I've had a heart-to-heart talk with you. But I haven't asked your name yet. I'm sorry for being rude. Haha, my name is Chu Yang. I'm just a nobody." Chu Yang smiled. A certain king of hell was very humble this time. Chu Yang's name was like thunder in the entire heavenly imperial court. He was at the level of a bright moon in the sky. Tang clan's third young master was in awe. "Ah? So, brother, you're Chu Yang? The legendary Chu Yang who killed Mo Yutian and was chased by Mo Yutian for 180,000 miles. But he's still safe and sound? That invincible Chu Yang?" Then, he suddenly remembered a very important matter. Rumor has it that this Chu Yang has amazing strength and courage. His medical skills are also amazing. Moreover, he has once treated the illness of the Lord of the Purple Cloud City. Am I right? Fuck. My illness? Now in other words, this Chu Yang was likely to be his savior. If this was true, wouldn't it mean that the heavens had opened their eyes and sent their savior to him? Thinking of this, Tang clan's third young master's heart burned. Flattery flowed out like the water of the Yangtze River. Those flattering words were so mushy that Chu Yang, Tan, and Yao Ningning blushed with shame. Sure enough, there's always someone better than you. Even idiots have different grades, high grades, top grades, and ultimate grades. Chu Yang didn't expect that he would be so famous now. After listening to someone's praises, his heart was naturally filled with pride. He felt relaxed and happy, but on the surface, he forced himself not to show it. He laughed dryly and said, "I am indeed the one who killed Mo Yuntian. However, I really don't deserve your praise. Everything I did was because I was forced to do it. I had no other choice." The Tang family's third young master beamed with joy. "How is that an exaggeration? You are the one that my idol dreams of." Chu Yang looked at this bamboo-like figure and finally couldn't help but continue to curse in his heart. Motherfucker, are all my fans like this? I'm quite comfortable with her mouth, but isn't her image a little too lousy? You flatter me. Chu Yang laughed dryly. Obviously, he wanted to end the topic quickly so that everyone could go back to what they were doing. The Tang family's third young master acted as if he had met his lifelong confidant. "Brother Chu, Hero Chu, you said that life is beautiful, right? There are many things worth cherishing, aren't there?" Chu Yang laughed dryly. "That's right. It makes sense. In fact, there are many things in this world that are more important than martial arts. Don't you think so?" The Tang family's third young master said fervently. "For example, family, friendship, love, and the experience of all kinds of emotions in the world. Don't you think so?" Chu Yang agreed with this. "Yes, that's right." The Tang family's third young master beamed with joy. "Actually, my martial arts cultivation is still advancing bravely, and there's not much delay. It's just that there's a problem somewhere else. And this kind of problem, Brother Chu, you've dealt with it once before, or perhaps you've dealt with it many times before." As he said this, he kept winking. Chu Yang was stunned. Ah? Looking at this guy who hadn't even reached heaven grade, it seemed that he couldn't figure out his martial arts cultivation. Did he really have any martial arts cultivation left? He was actually still advancing bravely? Chu Yang's eyebrows twitched violently a few times. He laughed dryly and said, "This? If it's possible, I'll definitely help you." Although this guy was a little wretched and shameless, he put his shamelessness out in the open. At least, he was a real villain. At least, he was much more adorable than fake emperors like Delayed Rain. Under this comparison, Chu Yang inexplicably had a good impression of him. The four of them formed a very strange small group. They chatted as they walked. The Tang family's third young master was no longer in a hurry to chase after girls. He just kept trying to worm his way into being friends with Chu Yang. He really talked about everything that was good to hear. It didn't take long for Chu Yang's status to soar. Now, it seemed that he had already surpassed Jun Ho. He believed that after a while, it would be easy for him to surpass Saint Monarchs. As for the words, a divine doctor in the world with miraculous hands, they didn't stray from the truth. In any case, Chu Yang was already the #1 divine doctor in the heavenly imperial court. His purpose was as clear as day and he didn't hide it at all. While chatting along the way, Chu Yang and the other two also saw that although this guy looked disgusting and was full of annoyance, he was actually not a bad person. His character was very straightforward. He put everything out in the open. He was definitely the kind of guy who was despicable to the point of being obvious. If there was a flaw that he was showing now, it was only a little arrogance. Although he was full of flattery to Chu Yang and didn't dare to slight him, he was obviously superior to Tan Tan and Yao Ningning. "I'm talking to you because I think highly of you. I'm giving you a lot of face." While chatting along the way, everyone also understood what was going on with him. It turned out that when he was inspecting his family's business that day, it was actually because he had spent all the money he had brought with him. He went to the counter to get money. Then, when he went to the pharmacy, he happened to see a beautiful girl who was like a fairy buying medicine. At first sight, he was immediately infatuated and couldn't control himself. Without a doubt, he naturally went up to strike up a conversation. Of course, he pretended to be rich and imposing. Or he said it in a way that was a little annoying. He hadn't even spoken 2 sentences when he was deeply looked at by the girl. After that one look, this guy was stunned there. He didn't even know when the girl left. But it was strange. Ever since that one look, no matter what he was doing, he couldn't help but think of that cold as ice and proud as snow. He actually became absent-minded. Especially when he was going home to have fun with his wife and concubines. Often, when he was in high spirits, when he was riding the horse and raising his spear, it was as if cold water had been poured on his head. He was like a senior monk who had no desires. How could old Tang, who was like a hungry pervert in the past, endure this? He was simply living a life worse than death. What an exaggerated look! One look left his soul. Although old Tang's fear of that girl had already gone to his bones, he could only choose to ask her for help. In addition, old Tang also had a small extravagant hope. If he could pursue that girl, wouldn't that be he? When the three of them understood this, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sigh, how should I describe your actions? You really dare to think too much. Chu Yang sighed. To be able to injure someone's soul with just one look, and without showing any signs or traces, the most conservative estimate is that she has to be at least a heavenly human level cultivator with a profound cultivation level. You're just a mere earth level cultivator from an aristocratic family, and you actually dared to have ideas about her. You're really too lucky to be able to live to this day and still have the chance to see her. What? Heavenly human level? And a heavenly human level cultivator at that? Are you sure? Hearing this, third young Master Tang was instantly dumbfounded. Then, he watched as beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on his forehead and fell to the ground with a plop sound. He was done for. For a moment, he only felt that his two thighs were spasming. Oh my God, I've chased after her for so long. She's actually a goddess of death? Oh my God! The Tang family's third young master touched his slender neck, his face full of lingering fear. It was as if his head had fallen off several times and then been put back on again. So, your situation is not an illness, but an injury. Someone has left an imprint on your soul. Chu Yang smiled faintly. Then, can you treat it? The Tang clan's third young master looked at Chu Yang with hope. Chu Yang pondered for a moment and said, This should still be treatable. If it was in the past, Chu Yang wouldn't have dared to guarantee that he could cure it. This was because to cure this kind of injury, it didn't depend on magical elixirs or unique medical skills. The most basic and most necessary condition was that the doctor must have a higher cultivation level than the person who did it. Now that Chu Yang had reached the level of a saint, it was naturally not difficult for him to cure a heavenly human level imprint. Ah? That's great! Tang Yangwei immediately danced with joy. He became excited. Oh my God! You don't know what I've been through these past few days. I racked my brains, and used every means to move that woman's heart. Why would I chase after that fierce woman if you can cure it? I want a woman, not a grandaunt who doesn't even dare to look at me. Ha! Then, this third young Master Tang became even more lively. He started to brag even more wantonly. For a moment, the magic conch buzzed, and fat cows flew all over the sky. Dust flew everywhere. Back then, for that concubine of mine, I first introduced a master to her younger brother, then arranged a good job for her older sister and brother-in-law. Then I went to chat with her parents every day. Oh my God, like this, 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 like this. Chu Yang Tan and Yao Ningning looked at each other. This guy's saliva was flying everywhere. And it was all about finding a concubine. In the blink of an eye, he had already said several things. Moreover, it seemed that he still had a lot to say. However, looking at how engrossed he was and how proud he sounded, it wasn't hard to guess that he was the kind of person who paid attention to emotions. He had never done something like forcing a girl before. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.